Hey there, tonight we're diving into the surprising impact of Queen Elizabeth I on the Renaissance. Not the glittering fairy tale version you know, but the reality of an era where a queen's power reshaped art, science, and the English language itself. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now make yourself cozy, maybe adjust your room temperature or get that cup of tea, and let's explore tonight's tale together. In the grand circus of history, Queen Elizabeth I's early life was a high-wire act without a safety net. Born on September 7, 1533, she entered the world already carrying a hefty backpack of expectations, thanks to her father, Henry Roman VIII, and the infamous mother, Anne Boleyn. Talk about family baggage. The Tudor court was a veritable minefield of ambition, intrigue, and enough drama to make a soap opera look like a Sunday picnic. Elizabeth's childhood was like trying to play musical chairs with a bunch of people who'd rather see you trip than take a seat. From the moment Anne Boleyn lost her head, not metaphorically, but literally, in 1536, Elizabeth's life flipped like a coin. She went from being a princess to a persona non grata, labeled illegitimate by a father who was busier swapping wives than a kid with trading cards. Let's just say Henry Roman VIII had a penchant for collecting wives, and unlike your average collection, his came with their own tragic endings. This wasn't just a family squabble. It was the kind of game where the stakes were your very existence. Elizabeth's formative years were spent navigating this perilous landscape, where being in the wrong place or saying the wrong thing could lead to an extended stay in the Tower of London, a place about as welcoming as an alligator-infested swamp. But young Elizabeth was no shrinking violet. Even as a child, she had a knack for survival that would make a reality TV contestant envious. Her education was top-notch, courtesy of some of the brightest minds of the time. She learned Latin, Greek, French, and Italian, because why not collect languages while your family collects scandals? Fast forward to 1558, when the unlikeliest of scenarios unfolded. Elizabeth, the girl once written off as illegitimate, ascended to the throne. Talk about a plot twist worthy of Shakespeare himself. She inherited a kingdom that was less a unified nation and more a jigsaw puzzle with a few pieces missing. England was in debt up to its royal eyeballs, thanks to her predecessor's penchant for expensive wars and lavish lifestyles. The crown owed about £227,000, a sum that, for context, would buy you a small army or two back in the day. In the political chess game of the 16th century, Elizabeth was the queen who could move in any direction, and often did. Her court was a hotbed of suitors, each more persistent than the last, trying to woo the queen with promises of alliances, power, and the occasional heartfelt sonnet. But Elizabeth wasn't buying what they were selling. She knew that marriage was the political equivalent of handing over the keys to the kingdom, and she wasn't about to let anyone else drive. Take, for instance, the case of Philip Roman II of Spain, who had previously been married to her sister, Mary I. Philip's proposal was less about love and more about geopolitics. Elizabeth had no interest in playing the role of a pawn in someone else's game. Her decision to remain single was a masterstroke of statesmanship, allowing her to maintain control and avoid foreign entanglements that could lead England into yet another costly conflict. Economically, Elizabeth's reign was a balancing act. She inherited a treasury running on fumes, but she knew how to pinch a penny until it squealed. Her policies encouraged trade and exploration, laying the groundwork for what would eventually become the British Empire. This wasn't just about survival. It was about setting the stage for a period of prosperity that would change the face of England. Elizabeth's reign was marked by her ability to play the long game. She knew the value of image and used it to her advantage, presenting herself as the Virgin Queen, married only to her country. This wasn't just a clever PR move. It was a declaration of independence in a world where queens were often defined by their marital status. So, as Elizabeth took the throne, she was more than just a monarch. She was a trailblazer in a male-dominated world. Her early life was a series of trials by fire, each one preparing her for the challenges ahead. She turned the tables on her doubters and skeptics, proving that being underestimated could be her greatest weapon. Elizabeth I's story wasn't just about survival. It was about flourishing in a world that had written her off. Her legacy would be one of resilience, intelligence, and a refusal to play by anyone else's rules. In the end, Elizabeth wasn't just a queen, she was a symbol, a reminder that even in the most turbulent of times, the human spirit is capable of remarkable things. And if that's not a lesson worth remembering, what is? Elizabeth's story didn't just start with her becoming a symbol of resilience. It was just getting started. Now, let's peek behind the velvet curtains of her reign. The English Renaissance was hardly a time of leisurely art appreciation for Elizabeth. It was more of a juggling act with flaming torches while riding a unicycle on a tightrope over a pit of crocodiles. Her treasury was a sieve, leaking money faster than a shopaholic in a mall during a clearance sale. When Elizabeth took the throne, England was in debt to the tune of about £227,000. To put it in perspective, that's like inheriting a mansion and realizing all you've got in the bank is enough for a down payment on a garden shed. Now, Elizabeth wasn't one to wallow in the financial mire. She had a keen eye for economics and an even keener sense of what needed to be done to transform England from a struggling state into a burgeoning power. Her approach, think of it as the Tudor edition of Extreme Makeover, Royal Edition. She ramped up trade, encouraged exploration, and turned England's naval prowess into a formidable force. It was under her reign that Sir Francis Drake decided to take the scenic route around the world, essentially redefining, taking the long way home. One of Elizabeth's shrewdest moves was the Elizabethan religious settlement of 1559, a masterstroke of political wizardry. In a time when religious discord could spark wars faster than you could say heresy, Elizabeth found a way to play both sides like a pro. By establishing the Church of England with herself as the supreme governor, she managed to keep a lid on the simmering religious tensions that were boiling over in other parts of Europe. It was a delicate balancing act of Protestant reforms with just enough Catholic traditions to avoid outright rebellion. Think of it as the ecclesiastical equivalent of a perfectly balanced cocktail. But it wasn't just religion that Elizabeth had to worry about. There was the small matter of the Spanish Armada, which was less of a fleet and more of a floating fortress, sent by Philip Roman II of Spain in 1588. Philip, still smarting from Elizabeth's rejection and his Catholic zeal, decided to send a not-so-friendly reminder of Spain's might. Picture this, an armada of 130 ships with 30,000 men on board, hell-bent on invading England and teaching Elizabeth a lesson in humility. It was like a reality TV showdown, with England cast as the scrappy underdog. Elizabeth, ever the canny strategist, didn't just sit back and wait for the armada to arrive. She rallied her forces, and with the help of the English weather, which, as any Brit would tell you, is as unpredictable as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, the Spanish Armada was met with stormy seas and the fierce resistance of the English navy. The result, a resounding victory for Elizabeth. The Spanish ships were scattered, battered, and sent packing, proving that sometimes the best ally you can have is Mother Nature herself. While Elizabeth was busy thwarting invasions and managing her kingdom's finances, a young playwright named William Shakespeare was busy penning plays that would make him a household name for centuries to come. Under Elizabeth's patronage, the arts flourished. Theatres popped up like mushrooms after a rainstorm, and the English language was enriched by Shakespeare's inventive phrases, many of which we still use today. Elizabeth's court was a vibrant hub of culture, where the highbrow and the bawdy rubbed shoulders, each adding their own flavour to the melting pot of the English Renaissance. Elizabeth's reign was a masterclass in the art of the image. She understood that perception was as important as reality. Her portrayal as the Virgin Queen wasn't just a statement of her marital status. It was a clever branding strategy. By remaining unwed, Elizabeth maintained her autonomy, and by extension, England's. It was a bold move, turning what many saw as a disadvantage, her gender and marital status, into a source of strength. In a world where a queen was expected to marry and produce heirs, Elizabeth defied those expectations, proving that a woman could rule in her own right without needing a king by her side. But let's not sugarcoat it. Elizabeth's reign wasn't all sunshine and sonnets. Her rule was marked by plots and conspiracies, many of which aimed to unseat her. Most famous of these was the Babington plot of 1586, a convoluted scheme involving Mary, Queen of Scots, which ultimately led to Mary's execution. Elizabeth's decision to sign Mary's death warrant was a grim reminder of the harsh realities of power. It was a decision she reportedly agonized over, but in the cutthroat world of 16th century politics, it was a decision she believed necessary for her survival. Elizabeth's ability to adapt, to play the long game, and her shrewd political instincts were the bedrock of her reign. She was a monarch who understood that power was not just about wielding a scepter, but about knowing when to wield it and when to hold back. Her legacy was not just in the victories she won or the policies she enacted, but in the way she navigated the treacherous waters of her time, proving that sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when to stand firm and when to bend like a reed in the wind. As we leave Elizabeth to her courtly intrigues and diplomatic dances, it's clear her reign was a tapestry of contradictions, a time of great art and literature, of exploration and discovery, of religious strife and political machinations. It was a time when a queen could defy expectations and redefine what it meant to rule. But this story is far from over. We've only begun to scratch the surface of Elizabeth's world, a world where myth and reality intermingle, and where the Virgin Queen continues to captivate our imaginations. Stay tuned, because the Tudor saga has many more twists and turns to reveal. As we peel back the layers of Elizabeth's reign, we find a queen whose flair for drama extended far beyond the political stage. The arts during her time weren't just a sideshow. They were the main event. Picture Elizabeth's court as the original Renaissance fair, where the guest list included poets, playwrights, and musicians all vying for the Queen's favor. Her patronage wasn't just a nod of approval. It was the golden ticket to success. If you could catch Elizabeth's eye, your future was set. Well, as set as it could be in a time when your head could be separated from your body if you so much as sneezed incorrectly. Under Elizabeth's watchful gaze, London transformed into a buzzing hub of creativity and commerce, a kind of Elizabethan Silicon Valley, if you will. The Globe Theatre, the stomping ground of William Shakespeare himself, was more than just a venue for the bard's latest masterpieces. It was a cultural epicenter. With a seating capacity of around 3,000, it was the place to see and be seen. And if the content of the plays, often filled with bawdy humor and clever wordplay, wasn't enough to draw you in, the chance to rub shoulders with the city's elite certainly was. But let's not pretend it was all highbrow art and intellectual discourse. The theatre was a melting pot, where the rich and poor alike could enjoy a bit of escapism. For just a penny, you could stand in the yard as a groundling and be part of the action, sometimes literally, as actors performed mere feet away. And if you were lucky enough to afford a seat, you'd likely find yourself jostling for space next to a merchant, a noble, or perhaps even a spy. Yes, espionage was a thriving side hustle in Elizabethan England. The Globe wasn't just a theatre, it was a hotbed of intrigue. Elizabeth's support of the arts wasn't merely altruistic. She understood the economic potential of a thriving cultural scene. The theatres, with their allure, drew crowds, and those crowds needed food, drink, and accommodation. It was a domino effect of economic activity, boosting local businesses and filling the royal coffers, a nifty trick when your treasury's looking as empty as a glass at last call. By the end of her reign, London had grown into one of the largest cities in Europe, with a population around 200,000, largely thanks to this cultural and economic boom. Now, let's talk about fashion, because, in Elizabeth's world, what you wore could be as politically charged as any treaty. The Queen herself was a trendsetter, her wardrobe as carefully curated as her public image. Elizabeth's attire was a statement of power, of wealth, and of her indomitable spirit. Her dresses were masterpieces, adorned with jewels and embroidered with gold and silver thread, each more elaborate than the last. It's estimated that by the time of her death, she had over 2,000 gowns, a collection that could make even the most seasoned fashionista swoon. But it wasn't just about looking good, it was about looking intimidatingly good. In a world where appearance was everything, Elizabeth's fashion choices were as much about political posturing as personal style. Her elaborate ruffs and high collars weren't just for show, they were armor, a reminder of her status and authority. The message was clear. Elizabeth was not to be trifled with. Of course, this sartorial splendor wasn't without its pitfalls. The fashions of the time were, to put it kindly, a bit over the top. Picture corsets so tight they could make a boa constrictor envious, and skirts so wide they required their own zip code. It was fashion for the brave and the patient. And yet, despite the discomfort, or perhaps because of it, these styles became the gold standard. To be in Elizabeth's court, you had to play the game, and that meant dressing the part, even if it meant risking asphyxiation or toppling over like a felled tree. Elizabeth's impact on the arts and culture was profound, but it wasn't just about the glitter and glamour. Her reign marked a period of significant social mobility. Artists and playwrights who might have otherwise languished in obscurity found themselves catapulted to fame, their works celebrated, and their pockets lined with the Queen's favor. In a society where your birth often dictated your fate, this was nothing short of revolutionary. In the grand tapestry of history, Elizabeth's influence on the Renaissance was a vivid thread. She turned her court into a cultural powerhouse, a place where art and commerce intertwined to create something truly spectacular. But as with all tales of grandeur, there's a flip side. Beneath the veneer of prosperity and creativity lay the harsh realities of life in Elizabethan England. Plagues, poverty, and political treachery lurked in the shadows, ever ready to disrupt the glittering facade. Yet it's precisely this duality that makes Elizabeth's reign so fascinating. She was a monarch who understood the power of image, who wielded art and culture like a weapon, and who knew that sometimes, in order to rule, you had to put on a show. Her legacy is one of elegance and resilience, a reminder that in the theater of history, the greatest performances often come from those who dare to defy the script. And so, as we continue to explore the world she shaped, let's remember that behind every grand spectacle lies a story of grit and determination, a story that's far from over. Stay with us, because the curtain has only just risen on the next act of this remarkable tale. As we transition from the glittering world of Elizabethan culture, let's swivel our gaze to the chessboard of foreign policy, where Elizabeth I played her most intricate game. You know, the kind of game where the stakes aren't just a lost pawn or two, but the entire kingdom's future. And Elizabeth, she was the queen who knew how to turn even the most precarious situation into an opportunity, sometimes with unintended consequences that would make even the boldest gambler twitchy. Enter Mary, Queen of Scots, a cousin whose relationship with Elizabeth was as tangled as a bowl of spaghetti. Mary was the kind of relative you'd avoid at a family reunion, charming, ambitious, and with a claim to the English throne that made her a darling of Catholic Europe. Mary's life was like a Tudor soap opera, complete with romantic escapades and political intrigue. When she arrived in England, seeking Elizabeth's protection in 1568, it was less of a warm welcome and more of a welcome to your gilded cage situation. Elizabeth housed Mary in a series of castles, essentially putting the royal guest under house arrest for 19 years. Talk about overstaying your welcome. Mary's presence in England was the equivalent of a lit match near a powder keg. She was a Catholic figurehead in a Protestant country, and her very existence threatened to tip the scales of power. Elizabeth understood this all too well, balancing the tightrope between being a gracious relative and a shrewd monarch. But this wasn't just a family drama. It was geopolitics with a personal twist. Mary's claim to the English throne was a beacon to Catholic powers eager to see a return to the old faith, and Elizabeth knew that any misstep could lead to rebellion. The Babington plot of 1586 was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was an elaborate assassination attempt aimed at making Mary queen, orchestrated by Catholic conspirators with a flair for dramatic failure. When the plot was uncovered, Elizabeth faced an agonizing decision. The result? Mary lost her head, literally, in 1587. Elizabeth's hand was forced, not by choice, but by necessity, a grim reminder that in the ruthless world of Tudor politics, even queens weren't immune to the harshest of realities. Now, while Elizabeth was busy navigating the minefield that was her relationship with Mary, she was also playing a high-stakes game with European powers. Picture this. England, a small island nation, surrounded by the Catholic heavyweights of Spain and France, each with their own agenda and a penchant for meddling. It was like being caught between two bickering giants, and Elizabeth's strategy was nothing short of a diplomatic masterclass. Elizabeth's foreign policy was akin to a cat-and-mouse game, with England as the nimble feline outmaneuvering its larger, lumbering prey. Her refusal to marry was more than just personal preference. It was a calculated political move. By staying single, Elizabeth kept potential suitors and their countries dangling on a string, each hoping to win her favor. It was a delicate dance, keeping the peace while subtly encouraging rivalry among potential enemies. But even the best-laid plans can have unforeseen consequences. Elizabeth's support of Protestant Dutch rebels against their Spanish overlords was a bold move, one that would eventually lead to the Spanish Armada's ill-fated invasion attempt. In backing the Dutch, Elizabeth was playing a dangerous game of chess, using the Low Countries as pawns to keep Spain in check. Her decision to send English troops to aid the Dutch was less about altruism and more about self-preservation, ensuring that Spain's attention was diverted from England's shores. The Spanish Armada of 1588 was a consequence of this high-stakes gamble. Philip Roman II of Spain was not a man to be trifled with, and Elizabeth's meddling in his affairs was a thorn in his side. The Armada, a fleet of 130 ships, was supposed to be an unstoppable force, a floating fortress ready to crush England. It was the ultimate showdown, a clash of titans where the underdog came out on top. Thanks to a combination of English tenacity, superior naval tactics, and lest we forget, the infamous English weather, the Armada was defeated, its ships scattered like leaves in a storm. Yet, the cost of this victory wasn't just measured in sunk ships and lost soldiers. The economic toll was significant. The war with Spain drained England's coffers, and while the defeat of the Armada was a glorious moment, it left the country with a hefty bill and a lingering threat of further conflict. Elizabeth's foreign policy, while often successful, was a juggling act with flaming torches, and the consequences were felt long after the last cannonball had been fired. In the grand tapestry of Elizabeth's reign, her foreign policies were threads woven with caution, ambition, and a touch of daring. She was a queen who understood the power of alliances and the art of playing one side against the other. Her ability to navigate the complex web of international relations was nothing short of extraordinary, but it was a game that came with a price. The myth of Elizabeth's Gloriana image, a queen who could do no wrong, was often at odds with the gritty reality of her reign, where decisions had far-reaching implications, and the cost of power was measured in both blood and gold. As we delve deeper into the world Elizabeth crafted, it's clear that her legacy was built on more than just victory and pageantry. It was a reign defined by resilience and a keen understanding of the political landscape. She was a monarch who played the long game, using her wit and wisdom to navigate the choppy waters of European politics. But as with any game of this magnitude, there were winners and losers, and the consequences of her actions would echo long after her time on the throne. And so, as we leave behind the machinations of Elizabeth's foreign policy, remember that her story is far from over. The Tudor saga continues, a tale of ambition, intrigue, and the unwavering determination of a queen who refused to be a pawn in anyone else's game. Stay with us as we continue to unravel the threads of this remarkable era, where the past whispers secrets that still captivate our imaginations today. As we pivot from the diplomatic tightrope walk that was Elizabeth's foreign policy, it's time to take a step back and examine her legacy as the sun finally sets on her reign in 1603. Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, has become something of an icon in the annals of history, a symbol of the so-called Golden Age of England. But was it really a golden age? Or is that just the gilded nameplate on what was, in reality, a rusted piece of Tudor furniture? First off, let's tackle the myth of the Golden Age. Sure, Elizabeth's reign was peppered with dazzling achievements. Shakespeare wrote plays that still pack theatres. The defeat of the Spanish Armada was nothing short of epic, and explorers like Sir Walter Raleigh were busy planting British flags in far-off lands. But for many of her subjects, life was less about experiencing a renaissance of culture and more about surviving a relentless cycle of hardship and strife. Poverty was rampant, with many Londoners living in conditions that would make you think twice about romanticizing the era. The population of England exploded from about 5 million in 1520 to nearly 4 million by the end of Elizabeth's reign, and not everyone was invited to the Renaissance party. Economically, the Tudor era was a roller coaster of boom and bust. Elizabeth's reign saw inflation rates soar to around 400% due to the influx of silver from the New World and debased coinage by her predecessors. The poor bore the brunt of these economic shifts, grappling with rising bread prices and stagnant wages. In contrast, the wealthy were busy expanding their estates and enjoying the fruits of global trade. Talk about income inequality before it was cool to talk about income inequality. Despite these challenges, Elizabeth was a savvy ruler who knew how to turn a grim situation into an opportunity. Her policies laid the groundwork for the future British Empire, but not without cost. The economy was buoyed by the wool trade, yet the enclosure of common lands for sheep farming left many rural families displaced and destitute. It was a classic case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and sometimes a stumble into a mud puddle. Politically, Elizabeth's choice to remain unmarried had a profound impact. Her status as the Virgin Queen wasn't just a catchy moniker. It was a strategic decision to maintain control over her kingdom. By not marrying, she avoided entangling alliances and kept suitors, and their nations, guessing. However, this choice came with its own set of challenges. The lack of a direct heir created a succession crisis that loomed over her later years, a ticking Tudor time bomb waiting to explode. When Elizabeth died childless in 1603, she left a kingdom that was stable in some respects, but fraught with uncertainty about the future. And then there's the image of Elizabeth herself, carefully crafted tapestry of power and purity. The Virgin Queen persona was part PR genius, part necessity. It allowed her to project an image of strength and independence, defying the expectation that a woman must be defined by her marital status. Yet behind the carefully controlled image was a ruler who faced constant challenges to her authority, from rebellious nobles to the threat of foreign invasion. Elizabeth's reign was a masterclass in the art of survival, where every decision was a calculated move in a game where the stakes were life and death. As we peel back the layers of the Virgin Queen's legend, it becomes clear that Elizabeth's impact on the Renaissance was a complex tapestry of triumphs and trials. Her support of the arts helped ignite a cultural explosion that we still celebrate today, but it wasn't just about putting on a good show. It was about crafting a national identity, a sense of pride and purpose in a time of uncertainty and change. Elizabeth's reign may have been the stuff of legends, but it was also a time of gritty realities, of economic hardship and political intrigue, of dazzling achievements shadowed by harsh truths. The Elizabethan era was less a golden age and more a time of golden opportunities seized and squandered in equal measure. Yet, it was precisely this complexity that made Elizabeth's reign so captivating. She was a monarch who defied expectations, who ruled with a combination of charm, cunning, and sheer force of will. In the end, Elizabeth I was a ruler who left an indelible mark on England and the world. Her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of politics, economics, and religion was nothing short of remarkable. Her legacy is not just in the victories she achieved or the myths she inspired, but in the way she embodied the spirit of an age, a time when the world was changing, and those who dared to lead had to be prepared to change with it. And so, as we close the curtain on Elizabeth's reign, we're left with a story that is as much about resilience as it is about greatness. The Virgin Queen may have left this world without an heir, but her legacy endures, a reminder that history is not merely a record of what once was, but a testament to the enduring power of human ambition and ingenuity. Elizabeth's story is not just one of a monarch, but of a woman who defied the odds to shape a nation and a world, a story that continues to inspire and intrigue long after the last page has turned. As our exploration of Elizabeth I comes to an end, let's remember that history is not just about dates and events. It's about the people who lived it, the choices they made, and the legacies they left behind. Elizabeth's reign was a remarkable chapter in the grand narrative of history, a story of drama, determination, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. And while the myth of the Golden Age may be just that, a myth, it's a myth rooted in the undeniable achievements and enduring influence of one of history's most fascinating figures. So, the next time you hear the name Elizabeth I, think of her not just as the Virgin Queen, but as a symbol of a time when the world was on the brink of transformation, and those who dared to dream could change the course of history. The Incas, those high-altitude masterminds of South America, cobbled together a sprawling network of roads that would make any modern urban planner weep with envy. Picture 25,000 miles of expertly crafted paths snaking through the Andes without the help of a single wheel. That's right, they built a highway system that could stretch from New York to Sydney and back again, all without the convenience of rolling luggage. Instead, llamas were the Uber of the Inca Empire, but more on our fuzzy friends later. Now, let's have a candid chat about the Inca roads. They weren't just a bunch of dirt tracks. We're talking about intricately constructed pathways with meticulous engineering to boot, stone-paved sections, suspension bridges made of woven grass, and stairways that could give your Fitbit a nervous breakdown. The Incas knew their stuff, building roads that could withstand the test of time, or at least several centuries of earthquakes and invasions. But before you start thinking, these roads were the yellow brick kind, leading to a utopia of harmony, let's pump the brakes. The romantic idea of the Inca Empire as a peaceful, cooperative society is a glossy myth that glosses over the gritty reality. Sure, they made impressive roads, but the construction came with a fair share of blood and sweat. The Incas had a system of labor tax called mida, which required subjects to work on public projects like, you guessed it, road building. And if you were an Inca subject, you didn't really have a choice. It was either help build the empire or risk becoming a part of its darker history. Let's dig a bit deeper into the practicalities of these roadways. We're not talking about a leisurely stroll through the mountains here. The Inca roads were the backbone of the empire's administration and economy. They connected cities, ceremonial centers, and agricultural regions, allowing for efficient movement of armies, messengers, and goods. It's like they built the ancient equivalent of Amazon Prime, but with more llamas and less two-day shipping. These roads also had tambos, or way stations, strategically placed along the route. Think of them as ancient rest stops, providing food and shelter for travelers. This network kept the empire glued together, ensuring that messages could travel at lightning speed. Well, lightning speed for the 15th century. Chasquis, the empire's relay runners, could cover up to 150 miles a day, passing messages like a well-oiled human postal service. They were the original marathon runners, but rather than chasing personal bests, they were carrying the weight of an empire. Now, I know what you're thinking. How in the world did they manage to keep this massive network up and running without the wheel? The answer lies in their genius for adaptation. The Andes aren't exactly wheel-friendly terrain, with their steep inclines and unpredictable weather. Instead, the Incas designed roads that worked with the natural landscape rather than against it. They carved stairs into steep slopes and constructed bridges that swayed like hammocks over gorges. And yes, they did all this while keeping their empire humming. It's worth noting that the roads were not just for show. They were arteries for an empire that thrived on control and communication. The Inca rulers, perched in their capital of Cusco, could dispatch orders across the empire with impressive speed. This level of connectivity allowed them to maintain a tight grip on their sprawling territories. But don't let the efficiency fool you into thinking the roads made for a purely happy empire. The Incas were adept at using their infrastructure for both political control and military maneuvering. Roads were as much about power as they were about progress. All that said, let's not romanticize the Inca achievements without a nod to their harsh realities. While their innovations were groundbreaking, their society was far from the idyllic picture some might paint. The empire was a complex machine that required constant maintenance, often at the expense of the common people. The roads that facilitated trade and communication also served as routes for conquest and control. The Incas were masterful in their expansion, but they didn't always play nice with their neighbors. Their roads paved the way for imperial dominance, but also for the eventual arrival of the Spanish, who saw these same roads as convenient pathways to conquest. In the end, the Inca trade routes remind us that history is a tapestry woven with both triumphs and tribulations. The roads were feats of engineering brilliance, yes, but they were also symbols of a society that was as complex and contradictory as any in history. So, while we marvel at the ingenuity of the Inca road builders, we should also remember the realities of the people who toiled to create them and the empire that both supported and exploited their labor. With all this in mind, the next time you're stuck in traffic, perhaps spare a thought for those ancient road builders up in the Andes. They may not have had wheels, but they sure knew how to keep things moving. And as we continue to explore the wonders of Inca infrastructure, remember that every stone they laid tells a story of ambition, resilience, and the relentless march of history. Speaking of things that move without wheels, let's bring in the real MVPs of the Inca Empire, llamas and alpacas. These fluffy, four-legged Sherpas were the backbone, or should we say, backlug of the Inca economy. Without these animals, the empire's trade routes would have been little more than scenic hiking trails through the Andes. Imagine trying to haul sacks of potatoes and woven textiles across treacherous mountain passes on foot. Sounds like a real-life endurance test, right? Enter the llama, with its uncanny ability to carry loads of up to 70 pounds over long distances. Alpacas, on the other hand, were more about quality over quantity, contributing their soft wool to the textile industry. Together, they were the Uber and FedEx of the Inca world, minus the surge pricing and lost packages. But let's not get overly sentimental about these adorable workhorses. While llamas and alpacas were indispensable to the empire, their deployment was all about cold, hard economics. The Incas, ever the pragmatic rulers, maximized their utility by breeding these animals for specific traits and ensuring they were strategically distributed across the empire. In terms of efficiency, the Incas were way ahead of the game, understanding that a well-fed llama was a productive llama. They even developed a system of pastures and rotational grazing to keep their herds in tip-top shape. It's a wonder those llamas didn't demand better working conditions. Now, how did the Incas keep track of all these animals, not to mention the vast array of goods flowing through their empire? Enter the quipu, a system that makes modern spreadsheets look like child's play. Picture a series of colored strings with knots in various positions, each one representing different data points like quantities, dates, and even complex narratives. This was the Incas' way of keeping tabs on everything from tax obligations to military inventories. Imagine a data-driven society where accountants didn't need calculators, just a sharp eye and agile fingers. The quipu was an analog powerhouse that turned strings into statistics, allowing the Incas to maintain a level of organization that would impress even the most seasoned CPA. Of course, quipus weren't just about counting beans, literally or metaphorically. They were the empire's information highway, allowing for the precise management of resources across a vast and varied landscape. Whether it was keeping track of the number of llamas in a herd or the amount of maize in storage, quipus were the silent heroes of Inca administration. They were the unsung champions behind the scenes, ensuring that the empire's gears kept turning smoothly. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful tools are the ones that don't make a lot of noise. But let's not get too carried away with the romance of these ingenious systems. Beneath the surface of this meticulously organized society lay a harsh reality. The Incas were masters of resource management, but their system was driven by an unyielding demand for control. The labor required to maintain their empire was immense, and it was often extracted from the populace through the meter system. This labor tax ensured that every able-bodied subject contributed to the construction and maintenance of public works, from roads to agriculture terraces. The Incas had a knack for turning necessity into opportunity, but it was a double-edged sword that cut deeply into the lives of their subjects. So, while the quipus dangled their data in silence, they also served as a constant reminder of the empire's reach. The Incas were efficient, yes, but their efficiency came at a cost. The empire's need for resources and labor was insatiable, and it was the common people who bore the brunt of this relentless machine. The quipus, with their knots and colors, told the stories of an empire in motion, but they also whispered of the lives entangled in its web. It's a sobering thought that behind every knotted string was a tale of human endeavor and sacrifice. Turning our gaze back to the roads, it's clear that the logistical challenges facing the Incas were as diverse as the landscapes they traversed. From the coastal deserts to the snow-capped peaks of the Andes, the empire was a patchwork of ecosystems, each presenting its own set of hurdles. And yet, the Incas managed to keep the wheels, or rather, the hooves, turning. Their genius lay in their adaptability, their ability to tailor solutions to fit the problem at hand. Whether it was building complex irrigation systems to support agriculture or devising strategies to keep trade routes clear of natural obstacles, the Incas were nothing if not resourceful. But let's not sugarcoat it. The logistics of maintaining such a vast empire were nothing short of a nightmare. The Incas faced constant challenges, from natural disasters to the logistical headache of coordinating labor across distant regions. Yet, They navigated these obstacles with a blend of innovation and brute force. It's a testament to the resilience of a society that thrived in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. So, while we marvel at their achievements, let's also acknowledge the sheer determination it took to keep the empire running smoothly. As we weave through the intricacies of the Inca trade network, it becomes clear that every thread of this tapestry was woven with purpose. The roads, the llamas, the quippers, all were cogs in a vast machine that powered one of history's most remarkable empires. But amidst the innovation, there was also exploitation, a reminder that progress often comes at a human cost. The Incas were masters of their domain, but their mastery was built on the backs of those who had little choice in the matter. In the end, the story of the Inca trade routes is a complex one, filled with both triumphs and tribulations. It's a tale of innovation and ingenuity, but also of control and coercion. As we continue our journey through the world of the Incas, let's remember that history is rarely black and white. It's a vibrant tapestry, woven with threads of ambition, resilience, and the unyielding march of human endeavor. So, the next time you see a llama, perhaps spare a thought for its ancestors, who helped carry the weight of an empire on their sturdy backs. And as we delve deeper into the mysteries of the Inca Empire, let's keep our eyes open to both the marvels and the realities, for it's in the interplay of these forces that the true story of the Incas comes to life. As we delve deeper into the Inca Empire, it's time to spotlight the head honcho, the Sapa Inca. The name alone, Sapa Inca, sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, and for the Inca people, it was almost just that. The Sapa Inca wasn't just a king or an emperor. He was considered divine, a living god walking among mortals. Talk about pressure on the family tree. But hold your llamas, because this divine status wasn't just a birthright. It was a carefully constructed piece of imperial propaganda that would make any modern spin Dr. Nod in approval. The Sapa Inca's divine status was a clever tactic to unify a sprawling and diverse empire. When you're ruling over a patchwork quilt of cultures and terrains, from the sun-baked coastal plains to the dizzying heights of the Andes, divine authority is a handy tool. It wasn't just about coercion. It was about creating a shared identity that transcended the myriad languages and traditions of the peoples under Inca rule. It's like the ultimate brand makeover, turning a leader into a living deity to ensure loyalty and obedience. But let's not get too swept away by the glamour of this divine right. The Sapa Inca's godlike status was less about celestial endorsement and more about earthly power plays. The Inca elite knew how to wield religion as a political weapon, using the Sapa Inca's supposed divinity to cement their hold on power. They didn't just rule with iron fists. They ruled with divine mandates, which is significantly harder to argue with when your leader is supposedly descended from the sun itself. Now, let's talk bureaucracy. You might think the Inca administration was just a bunch of guys in feathered hats sitting around counting potatoes, but you'd be wrong. The Incas had a bureaucracy that could rival any modern government. Imagine a network of officials, record keepers, and administrators, all working together to keep the empire's gears turning smoothly. It was like the ultimate game of telephone, but instead of gossip, they were transmitting vital information about crop yields and troop movements. The Inca bureaucracy was a well-oiled machine, with officials known as curacas overseeing local regions and reporting directly to the central government in Cusco. And let's not forget the Quipucameocs, the Quipu specialists, who were the data analysts of their day. They managed to keep track of everything from labor obligations to inventory, all without the help of Excel spreadsheets. Their system was so efficient that it kept the empire humming along, even as it expanded across 500 miles of challenging terrain. But efficiency came at a cost. The Inca state was a demanding master, its reach extending into every aspect of daily life. The meter system wasn't just about road building. It was a means of extracting labor for everything from agriculture to military service. The bureaucratic class had to maintain a delicate balance, ensuring compliance while keeping the vast empire's needs met. It's a reminder that behind every great administrative achievement lies a landscape of human toil and sacrifice. Speaking of sacrifice, let's dive into the role of strategic marriages in the Inca playbook. These were not your average till-death do-us-part affairs. Marriages were political chess moves, designed to secure alliances and consolidate power across the empire. The Sapa Inca and his family orchestrated marriages with the finesse of a modern-day diplomat, marrying off relatives to local leaders to ensure loyalty and cooperation. It was a game of thrones, Andean style, with hearts and minds playing second fiddle to political ambition. But these marriages weren't just about expanding influence. They were propaganda tools that reinforced the divine status of the Inca elite. By marrying into powerful families, the Sapa Inca was seen as both a unifier and a demigod, spreading his celestial lineage across the empire. These unions were the glue that held the Inca state together, binding the empire's diverse peoples into a cohesive whole. Yet, beneath the romantic veneer, these marriages were calculated maneuvers, leveraging relationships for political gain. And here's where we peel back the layers of myth surrounding the divine leadership of the Incas. The notion of the Sapa Inca as a god king was as much about control as it was about faith. While the divine narrative was sold to the masses, the reality was that the Inca rulers were strategists par excellence, using every tool at their disposal to maintain their empire's dominance. They weren't just ruling by divine right, they were ruling by design, manipulating belief systems to reinforce their authority. This strategy was crucial in an empire where communication was key. The Inca roads, the chasquis, the quippus, they were all part of a grand design to keep the empire connected and responsive. The leadership understood that controlling the narrative was as important as controlling the resources. By combining religious belief with administrative efficiency, it created a state that was as formidable in ideology as it was in infrastructure. But let's not sugarcoat it. This was no utopia. The Inca rulers were masters of expansion, but their empire was built on the backs of a populace that had little say in the matter. The divine narrative might have soothed some, but for many it was a gilded cage. The labor demands, the political marriages, the relentless push for expansion, all served a leadership that was as pragmatic as it was pious. The Incas were architects of an empire that dazzled and dominated, but beneath the surface lay the stark realities of power and control. So, as we unravel the intricacies of the Inca political machine, let's keep in mind that this was a society adept at playing the long game. They fused belief with bureaucracy, strategy with spirituality, all in the service of an empire that was as much about myth as it was about might. And as we continue our exploration, we'll see how these elements came together to shape an empire that was both a marvel and a mystery, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. Stay tuned, because the story of the Incas is far from over, and there's still much more to uncover in this saga of power, politics, and propaganda. With all this talk of the Inca Empire's iron-fisted rule and celestial PR campaigns, you might be wondering, did they ever take a break from world domination to share a little culture and commerce? Oh, they did, but not exactly over a friendly cup of chicha. You see, the Inca trade networks were less about free trade agreements and more about state-sponsored exchanges that would make any modern economist clutch their pearls. First things first, let's set the stage. The Inca Empire, at its zenith, stretched across modern-day Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Argentina, Chile, and Colombia. That's a whole lot of ground to cover, especially when your primary means of transport involves llamas and some serious altitude adjustments. But this vastness was a double-edged sword. On one end, you had a melting pot of goods and ideas swirling around like a cultural smoothie. On the other, you had the ever-present threat of conflict bubbling under the surface like a badly contained volcano. Now, let's dive into the goods that were exchanged within this extensive network. The Incas were no strangers to luxury. Think finely woven textiles from alpaca and vicuña wool, which were so coveted they could make a fashionista's heart skip a beat. These textiles weren't just for flaunting at the local Andean gala. They were a form of currency, a way to grease the wheels of imperial administration and social stratification. Textiles were the Bitcoin of the Inca world, with intricate designs that spoke volumes about status and allegiance. But don't be fooled into thinking this was a one-way street of textiles and trinkets. The Incas were also big on agricultural exchanges. The empire's diverse climates allowed for a veritable buffet of crops: maize, potatoes, quinoa, and coca leaves, to name a few. These staples were transported along those legendary roads, turning the empire into an agricultural powerhouse. You might call it the original farm-to-table movement, with a side of state control. And while we're dishing out the goods, let's not forget the metalwork. The Incas were the magicians of metallurgy, crafting objects from gold, silver, and copper that were as much about religious significance as they were about bling. These metal goods flowed through the trade networks, not just as luxury items, but as symbols of divine favor and imperial might. In other words, they were the ancient equivalent of flashing your Rolex, status, power, and a little bit of celestial endorsement, all in one shiny package. Now, before you get too entranced by this picture of cultural harmony and economic prosperity, let's pump the brakes. The Inca trade networks, while impressive, were also instruments of control and coercion. The empire's expansion wasn't exactly a peaceful process. Incas were adept at using their roads and trade routes to project power and suppress dissent. Armies moved with an efficiency that would put a Swiss watch to shame, quelling rebellions and securing new territories with ruthless precision. Take, for instance, the strategic relocation of entire communities, a practice known as mitma. The Incas would uproot rebellious or troublesome groups, resettling them in more compliant areas of the empire. It was the ultimate game of cultural chess, designed to dilute potential threats and reinforce Inca authority. Imagine being told your new address is several hundred miles away, with no option to decline the invitation. It was less about cultural exchange and more about population control. But amidst this imperial maneuvering, genuine cultural achievements did emerge. The Incas were not just conquerors. They were also cultural synthesizers, absorbing and adapting the best of what their conquered peoples had to offer. This included not just goods, but ideas, architectural techniques, agricultural practices, and even religious beliefs were woven into the Inca tapestry. It was a pragmatic approach, turning conquered cultures into a source of strength rather than a point of contention. However, as with any great empire, the downside of connectivity was the spread of less desirable elements. Cue the ominous music for diseases. The Inca roads unwittingly facilitated the spread of illness, with diseases like smallpox hitching a ride alongside traders and travelers. The arrival of European diseases in the early 16th century was catastrophic, decimating populations that had no immunity to these new threats. It's a harsh reminder that trade and travel, while engines of progress, also carry risks that can have devastating consequences. In the end, the Inca trade networks were a microcosm of the empire itself, a blend of innovation and coercion, triumph and tragedy. They were the veins through which the lifeblood of the empire flowed, carrying not just goods and ideas, but also the weight of an imperial dream. So, while it's tempting to romanticize these ancient highways as idyllic paths of cultural exchange, the reality was far more complex. The Incas were masters of their domain, but their empire was built on foundations that were as fragile as they were formidable. As we continue to unravel the story of the Inca Empire, keep in mind that history is rarely as simple as it seems. The Inca trade networks were a marvel of engineering and organization, but they were also instruments of power and control. They tell a story of an empire that was as much about managing resources as it was about managing people. And as we delve deeper into this tale, we'll see how the Incas' ability to blend pragmatism with ambition shaped a civilization that was both awe-inspiring and deeply human. Stay tuned, because the next chapter of this story promises even more intrigue and insight into a world that was as complex as it was captivating. As the curtain falls on the Inca Empire, the legacy of their trade routes remains a tale of contradictions and complexity, a fitting reflection of an empire that was equal parts awe-inspiring and ruthless. These ancient highways, though now overgrown and largely forgotten, were once the arteries of an empire that thrived on connectivity. They paved the way for later developments, laying a foundation that even the Spanish invaders couldn't entirely erase. The Spaniards, pragmatic to a fault, saw these roads as a gift-wrapped invitation to conquest, a pre-existing network that allowed them to sweep through the Andes with alarming efficiency. It's a bit like inheriting a high-speed internet connection, but instead of streaming Netflix, you're streaming Conquest. Yet, let's not hand all the credit to the conquistadors. The Inca roads, in their heyday, were marvels of engineering and ingenuity, a literal uphill battle against the unforgiving Andean terrain. These routes facilitated a level of communication and control that would have been impossible otherwise. turning a geographically fragmented empire into a cohesive whole. The very fact that messengers could pass information across 500 miles with nothing but a pair of sandals and a determined sprint is a testament to the Incas' logistical prowess. It was an ancient equivalent of fiber optic cables, minus the tech support nightmares. Fast forward a few centuries, and you can still see the echoes of these roads in modern Andean culture and infrastructure. Many contemporary highways and pathways trace the same routes carved out by the Incas, a lasting testament to their foresight. The roads may no longer be the lifeblood of an empire, but they continue to connect remote communities, facilitating trade and interaction in a region that is as challenging today as it was 6 centuries ago. The Incas might not have envisioned their roads being used by tourists equipped with selfie sticks, but their spirit of connectivity endures. But what about the darker side of this legacy? The roads also remind us of the exploitation that underpinned the Inca Empire. The meter system, which fueled the construction and maintenance of these roads, was a precursor to forced labor practices that would haunt South America for centuries. The Spanish would later co-opt and expand this system, turning it into a cornerstone of colonial exploitation. It's a grim reminder that while the roads were symbols of progress, they were also built on the backs of those who had little say in their destiny. In contemplating the Inca trade routes, we uncover a broader lesson about human connectivity and complexity. The Incas, in their quest for imperial glory, created a network that was both a marvel of human innovation and a mechanism of control. It's a pattern that echoes throughout history, where the drive for progress often treads hand in hand with exploitation. The roads are a microcosm of this duality, a reminder that every advance comes with its own set of shadows. They teach us that history is rarely black and white, but a tapestry woven with both triumphs and tribulations. And what of the romantic notions we hold about ancient empires? The Incas are often portrayed as benevolent rulers, architects of a harmonious society nestled in the clouds. But peel back the layers, and the reality is more complex. A society driven by ambition, held together by a combination of innovation and coercion. It's a narrative that lures us in with tales of mystical landscapes and divine rulers, only to reveal the gritty realities of empire building. The roads, like the empire they served, are a testament to both the heights of human achievement and the depths of human ambition. As we wrap up this journey through the Inca trade routes, it's essential to remember that these roads were more than just physical pathways. They were conduits of culture, commerce, and control, shaping the Andes in ways that still resonate today. They remind us that the pursuit of connection, whether through roads, wires, or digital networks, is a defining feature of human civilization. The legacy of the Inca roads is one of resilience and adaptation, an enduring testament to the power of human ingenuity and a sobering reminder of the costs that often accompany progress. So, as you tuck away these tales of the Incas, spare a thought for the ancient road builders who dared to dream of a connected empire against all odds. Their roads may have been built for purposes both noble and nefarious, but their enduring legacy is a story of human endeavor that transcends time. The next time you're navigating the complexities of modern life, remember that you're walking in the footsteps of history, along paths paved by a civilization that understood both the promise and peril of connectivity. And perhaps, in that reflection, you'll find a deeper understanding of the world we continue to build today. In the sticky, sweltering lowlands of what we now call Mexico, the Olmec civilization strutted its stuff over 3,000 years ago, around 1200 BCE. These weren't your average ancient folks. They were the OGs of Mesoamerican culture, the granddaddies of pyramid building and ball game playing. While they never penned a bestseller or left behind a Rosetta Stone of their own, their influence echoes through the ages like a catchy pop song stuck in history's head. Now, before you're swept away by visions of Indiana Jones-style escapades, let's set the scene. We're talking about a geographical setup that's as dramatic as a soap opera. Picture lush, steamy jungles that would have Tarzan feeling right at home, sprawling plains, and the shimmering waters of the Gulf of Mexico as the backdrop. This was the Olmec stomping ground, a place where nature didn't just whisper. It screamed, "Survive if you can." Front and center in the Olmec Hall of Fame are those colossal stone heads. You know the ones, Massive, helmeted Nargins that could give Easter Island's Moe a run for their money. These bad boys aren't just any old rocks. They range from around 4 to 11 feet tall and weigh in at a jaw-dropping 8 to 40 tons. That's like having a couple of elephants parked on your lawn. But you know, more historical. Here's where the myth-busting begins. Some suggest these stone heads represent warriors, rulers, or even deities, while others whimsically speculate about ancient aliens dropping by for a sculpting session. But hold the space helmets. There's zero evidence for extraterrestrial artists in the Olmec record. Instead, the heads likely honored important leaders, carved with painstaking detail to capture their power and authority. Each head was unique, showcasing distinct facial features, which might even be the earliest Mesoamerican version of a presidential portrait. Now, let's talk dough, because no civilization thrives on head sculptures alone. The Olmecs knew their way around an economy, and it was more complex than a teenager's social media feed. They didn't have the luxury of Amazon Prime, but they did have a sophisticated trade network that stretched from the Valley of Mexico to the present-day regions of Oaxaca, and even as far south as what is now Costa Rica. This wasn't just a few guys with a backpack full of trinkets. It was a full-blown ancient supply chain. Trade goods included coveted items like obsidian, used for making razor-sharp tools and weapons, and jade, which was the bling of the day. Add to that cacao beans for those who could afford a chocolatey treat, and you've got a thriving marketplace. But the Olmecs didn't stop at luxury items. They were agricultural innovators too, cultivating staple crops like maize, beans, and squash, which formed the culinary backbone of Mesoamerican society. Maize was the superstar crop, the baiense of the Olmec diet, versatile, nutritious, and capable of feeding a growing population. It was so essential that some Mesoamerican myths even describe humans being created from maize dough. Talk about taking "you are what you eat" to a whole new level. While the Olmec economy was undeniably rich, it wasn't all sunshine and maize. The humid jungles and unpredictable climate meant that agriculture was a gamble. Crop failures could lead to famine, a stark reminder that nature wasn't always a benevolent provider. Yet, they managed to harness the environment's bounty, which supported not just their bellies, but also their burgeoning society. Navigating through this vibrant world, it's clear that the Olmecs were no ordinary civilization. They laid down cultural blueprints that subsequent Mesoamerican societies would build upon for centuries. From their enigmatic stone heads to their bustling trade routes, the Olmecs were as complex as they were influential. And as we continue to unravel their mysteries, one thing's for sure. These ancient innovators weren't just playing with stones, they were crafting a legacy. While the Olmecs were busy crafting their legacy out of stone and trading their way across ancient Mesoamerica, they were also building something a bit less tangible but equally monumental. A social hierarchy that kept their civilization humming along like a well-oiled, albeit ancient, machine. This wasn't just a society of stone heads and maize fields. It was a complex web of roles and relationships, with each individual playing their part in the grand Olmec opera. At the top of the Olmec food chain were the elite, the bigwigs who, if time machines existed, would probably be sipping overpriced lattes in a hipster cafe. These folks weren't just living the high life, they were the high life. They had the power, the resources, and quite possibly the first-century equivalent of avocado toast. The elite were typically the rulers and high priests, those who claimed a divine mandate to justify their positions, because who could argue with the gods, right? This intertwining of religion and politics was as inseparable as peanut butter and jelly, or in the Olmec's case, maize and beans. These elite leaders didn't just sit around admiring their colossal stone portraits. They were busy overseeing the construction of ceremonial centers, deciding which gods needed appeasing, and managing the trade networks that brought in luxury goods. This wasn't a 9-to-5 gig. It was a full-time power play, with divine right as their trump card. Religion wasn't just a Sunday affair for the Olmecs. It was woven into the very fabric of their daily lives. The gods were everywhere, from the cornfields to the stars, and the elite were the conduits through which divine favor flowed. This meant that the political structure was often draped in religious trappings. Picture a political rally where the main speaker is also delivering a sermon. The Olmecs didn't just believe in the gods, they depended on them to legitimize their leaders' authority. But let's not put all the spotlight on the upper crust. Beneath them was the backbone of Olmec society, the common folk. These were the people who made sure the ancient version of the economy didn't flatline. Farmers, artisans, and traders were the unsung heroes who kept society from crumbling faster than a stale tortilla. They tilled the land, crafted the goods, and bartered their way through life, all while ensuring the elite had their fill of jade bling and cacao. The day-to-day life of an Olmec commoner wasn't exactly a walk in the park. It involved hard labor, long hours, and a strong stomach to deal with the whims of nature. Crop failures could spell disaster, and yet these folks persisted, their resilience as enduring as the stone heads that watched over them. While the elite debated celestial matters, the common people were the ones with dirt under their fingernails, making sure the society didn't starve or collapse under its own weight. Now, let's debunk a little myth that often slips into the conversation, the idea of a classless, egalitarian society. Spoiler alert, the Olmecs were far from it. The societal divide was as real as the sweat on a farmer's brow. The elite lived in relative luxury, while the commoners toiled away, hoping for a good harvest and a stable life. This wasn't a utopia. It was a hierarchy with clear lines drawn in the fertile soil. The Olmecs also had a knack for specialization, which meant that your job wasn't just a way to pay the bills, it was your identity. Whether you were crafting intricate jade figurines or cultivating the next bumper crop of maize, your role was essential to the societal puzzle. This specialization helped the Olmecs thrive, turning their civilization into a well-oiled machine that could withstand the test of time. But let's not romanticize it too much. The reality was that the Olmec society, like any other, had its fair share of inequalities and struggles. The elite might have had divine mandates backing up their rule, but that didn't mean everyone was happy about it. Power, as always, came with its own set of challenges and dissent, even in a society as seemingly harmonious as the Olmecs. And then there was the matter of those divine mandates. In a world where the gods were thought to have a say in everything from the harvest to who sat on the throne, the intersection of religion and politics was as tangled as a ball of yarn. The Olmec elite used religion as both shield and sword, wielding divine favor to maintain order and justify their rule. It's a tale as old as time, where faith and power dance an intricate tango, each step cementing their hold on society. So, while the Olmec civilization is often remembered for its artistic achievements and agricultural prowess, it's the social structure that truly holds the key to understanding their world. This was a society that knew how to balance the spiritual with the practical, the divine with the mundane. And as we peel back the layers of their history, it becomes clear that the Olmecs were more than just stone heads. They were a complex, vibrant civilization with a social system that allowed them to thrive in a challenging world. As we leave the Olmec society, bustling with its myriad roles and divine politics, the story doesn't end here. There's still more to uncover about these ancient trailblazers who set the stage for the Mesoamerican civilizations that followed. So stay tuned, because the Olmecs have more secrets to share, and we're just getting started. Speaking of secrets, let's dive into the Olmec political potluck, where everyone brought their own divine dish, but not everyone got a taste. The Olmecs, like many ancient societies, were a mix of might, mysticism, and meticulous management. Their rulers didn't just wear crowns, they wore the aura of divine right, combining celestial endorsement with good old-fashioned human ambition. Now, let's talk about these rulers, the original influencers of their day. Forget Instagram. These guys were crafting their brand with stone and spirit. They were possibly the first to realize that controlling the narrative was half the battle. If you could claim the gods were on your side, you were already winning. Picture a leader not just as a political figure, but as a walking, talking link to the divine. It's like having the ultimate celebrity endorsement, except instead of a sneaker brand, you're pushing for societal order and spiritual guidance. The Olmec rulers' claim to fame was their supposed divine connection, and they milked it for all it was worth. They weren't just leaders. They were semi-divine figures whose decisions shaped the very fabric of Olmec life. Their influence extended far beyond simple governance. They were the architects of society's moral compass, holding sway over everything from ceremonial practices to trade agreements. This wasn't just a ceremonial title. It was a full-time gig with responsibilities that made modern politicians look like part-time volunteers. But let's cut through the divine fog and see what's really going on here. The Olmec political structure was as much about economic power as it was about spiritual leadership. Sure, they claimed divine right, but it was their control over resources and trade that truly solidified their power. The Olmec heartland had access to crucial trade routes, and their leaders were shrewd operators in this ancient marketplace. Think of them as the CEOs of a multi-regional corporation, with their fingers firmly in every pie from jade to cacao. This brings us to the PR spin around Olmec leadership. Were they truly divinely appointed, or was it just a clever way to keep the masses in line? It's a classic case of "because I said so," with a celestial twist. The divine right to rule wasn't just a spiritual claim, it was a political strategy. It kept the common folk in awe and the elite in power, a timeless tactic that echoes through history like a well-rehearsed mantra. But here's where things get juicy. The Olmec rulers weren't just sitting on their thrones waiting for divine inspiration. They were actively shaping the destiny of their civilization with decisions that had lasting impacts. Whether it was deciding on the construction of monumental centers like La Venta or negotiating trade agreements that would make or break their economy, these rulers were hands-on and strategic. They were the movers and shakers, the ones who set the rhythm for the Olmec dance. Of course, no power structure is without its cracks. The Olmec rulers, despite their divine claims, faced challenges that any leader would find daunting. Environmental changes, social unrest, and economic pressures all played their part in testing the resilience of Olmec governance. It's one thing to claim the gods are on your side. It's another to convince your people when the harvest fails or the trade routes are threatened. The Olmec rulers had to be masterful jugglers, balancing divine expectations with earthly realities. Their decisions weren't just about maintaining control. They were about survival in an unpredictable world. They had to navigate the tricky waters of power dynamics, where one wrong move could mean the difference between prosperity and collapse. As we peel back the layers of Olmec political life, it's clear that these rulers were more than just figureheads. They were the linchpins of a society that depended on their leadership to thrive. Yet, behind the aura of divine right and monumental achievements lay a complex web of power struggles and strategic decisions. It's a reminder that history is never as simple as it seems, and those who wield power often do so with a mix of ambition, cunning, and a touch of celestial flair. So, as we analyze the Olmec political structure, we're left with a fascinating tapestry of myth and reality. The divine right to rule may have been the official story, but the real narrative was one of human ingenuity and resilience. The Olmec rulers were trailblazers, navigating the murky waters of power with a deftness that resonates even today. And as we leave this chapter of Olmec history, remember that the story is far from over. We've only scratched the surface of the political dynamics that shaped this remarkable civilization. There's more to uncover, more to explore, and more secrets waiting to be revealed. So stick around, because the Olmecs aren't done surprising us yet. And speaking of surprises, let's pivot from the power plays of the Olmec elite to the cultural contributions that are anything but grey and stony. If the Olmecs had a claim to fame beyond their governance theatrics, it's their art and architecture. Two arenas where they really let their creative hair down. We're talking vibrant and eclectic, not the monotonous monolith some dusty books would have you believe. First up, let's tackle the misconception that the Olmecs were a one-trick pony when it came to culture. Sure, the colossal heads are the poster children of Olmec art, but trust me, there's more under this cultural iceberg than just massive noggins. The Olmecs were the Picasso of their time, except their canvases were stone, and their muses were guards, rulers, and possibly some very fashionable jaguars. They were masters at transforming stone and clay into intricate artworks that conveyed not just religious beliefs, but also the social pulse of their time. Take, for example, the baby face figures, those adorable, chubby-cheeked ceramic figurines that are as enigmatic as they are charming. These figurines, often found in burial sites, might have served religious or ceremonial purposes, possibly representing deceased infants or deities. They give us a window into the Olmec spiritual world, where the boundaries between the living and divine were as blurred as the lines in a modern abstract painting. Now, let's have a little chuckle at their sense of fashion, as displayed in their art. The Olmecs were trendsetters in their own right. adorning their sculptures with elaborate headdresses, ear spools, and clothing that made it clear they weren't just about spiritual significance, they were about style. Think of these artifacts as the Instagram influencers of the ancient world, showcasing the latest in elite Olmec fashion. And if you think those oversized headpieces were just for show, consider them the ancient equivalent of the iconic red carpet look, eye-catching, opulent, and definitely sending a message. But art wasn't the only arena where the Olmecs flexed their creative muscles. Their architectural feats were equally impressive, showcasing an understanding of space, form, and function that would make any modern architect nod in respect. La Venta, one of their most famous ceremonial centers, is a testament to their architectural prowess. At its peak, around 900 BCE, it featured a complex layout with a central plaza and a pyramid that soared about 30 meters into the sky. This wasn't just a pile of rocks. It was a carefully planned structure that aligned with astronomical events, displaying the Olmec's deep connection to the cosmos. Speaking of the stars, let's not forget the Olmec's contribution to Mesoamerican sports culture. They might have been the inventors of the Mesoamerican ball game, a sport that involved a rubber ball, a stone court, and more than a dash of ritual significance. Think of it as a mashup of soccer and basketball, but with stakes higher than your average Sunday league match. The game wasn't just about scoring points. It was a cosmic dance, possibly reenacting the eternal struggle between life and death, light and darkness. This wasn't just a pastime. It was a microcosm of the Olmec worldview. And here's a kicker. Those stone ball courts weren't just for show. They were meticulously aligned with celestial markers, indicating that the Olmecs were not only athletes, but also astronomers. They understood that every game played out under the watchful eyes of the gods, turning each match into a sacred event. It's as if they were saying, score a goal and make the cosmos smile. Talk about pressure. But before you imagine a homogeneous Olmec society where everyone marched to the same drum, let's bust that myth right open. The Olmecs were anything but a monolithic culture. Regional variations and local innovations added vibrant colors to their societal canvas. Sites like San Lorenzo, Tres Zapotes, and La Venta weren't just cookie-cutter versions of each other. They were unique hubs of cultural expression, each with its own architectural styles, religious practices, and artistic motifs. San Lorenzo, for instance, was the first major Olmec center and boasted an impressive array of basalt monuments and sophisticated hydraulic systems. Tres Zapotes, on the other hand, is where the earliest known long-count calendar date was discovered, a stone stela with a date equivalent to September 3, 32 BCE. This find not only highlights the Olmecs' mathematical and astronomical prowess, but also their role as cultural innovators. And let's not gloss over the regional nuances in Olmec art. The stylistic differences between the sites reveal a society that was as diverse as it was dynamic. Whether it was the intricate jade carvings found in La Venta or the colossal heads of San Lorenzo, each site tells a unique story of creativity and cultural exchange. The Olmecs were more like a jazz ensemble than a marching band, each region riffing off the others in a cacophony of cultural expression. So, as we delve into the Olmecs' cultural contributions, it's clear that they were more than just stone heads and ceremonial centers. They were artists, architects, and athletes, crafting a vibrant tapestry of life that resonated throughout Mesoamerica. Their legacy is a testament to human creativity and resilience, a reminder that even in the ancient world, culture was a living, breathing entity, ever-changing, ever-evolving. And as we leave behind the art-filled plazas and sports arenas of the Olmec world, there's still more to uncover about their society. The Olmecs have set the stage, but the curtain hasn't fallen yet. Stay tuned, because the next act promises even more revelations about these ancient trailblazers who dared to dream big and leave their mark on history. Our next stop on the Olmec time machine, the bittersweet symphony of decline. Picture this, a civilization that had once been the bay and say of Mesoamerica, suddenly facing a not-so-glamorous fade-out. But before you cue the violins, let's unpack why the Olmecs didn't just vanish in a puff of smoke. It wasn't aliens, a curse, or even a sudden lactose intolerance to maize. Nope, the reasons are more down-to-earth, albeit just as dramatic. First, let's talk weather, because even ancient societies couldn't escape Mother Nature's mood swings. Around 400 BCE, The Olmecs faced climatic changes that would make any farmer's heart skip a beat, a prolonged period of drought. Imagine relying on rain like a teenager relies on Wi-Fi, only to find it's not there when you need it most. Agriculture hit a rough patch, and food shortages made folks as grumpy as you'd be without your morning coffee. Meanwhile, environmental degradation was creeping in like an unwelcome guest who just wouldn't leave. The Olmecs, with their penchant for monumental architecture, had been clearing forests faster than a kid with a new set of crayons. Deforestation led to soil erosion, which was a real party pooper for agriculture. It's like the Olmecs threw a long-standing rave in the jungle, only to find out the venue couldn't handle the aftermath. Now, if you think that sounds like a recipe for disaster, toss in some internal strife, and you've got yourself a full-on historical soap opera. Social tensions were bubbling beneath the surface like a pot about to boil over. As resources dwindled, so did the social harmony that had kept their society humming along. The elite, with their divine mandates, suddenly looked less like heaven-sent leaders and more like out-of-touch aristocrats, sipping cacao while the common folk grappled with failing crops. The Olmecs, like any civilization, weren't immune to the human condition, ambition, greed, and the occasional power struggle. This internal turbulence set the stage for a shift in power dynamics. Outlying regions, once happy under the Olmec umbrella, likely began to entertain ideas of independence. Picture a Mesoamerican version of a teenager declaring, "You're not the boss of me," except with more jade earrings and fewer slammed doors. As the Olmec heartland began to unravel, their cultural influence spread like ripples in a pond, leaving a lasting legacy that resonated with subsequent Mesoamerican societies. The Maya, the Zapotecs, and even the Aztecs would later draw from the Olmec playbook, adopting and adapting their artistic styles, religious practices, and architectural innovations. It's like the Olmecs passed the cultural torch, and Mesoamerica ran with it, lighting up the region like a historical fireworks display. Despite their decline, the Olmecs' achievements remained etched in the annals of history. Their colossal stone heads, those iconic Nagins, became symbols of power and artistry that echoed through the centuries. The long count calendar they pioneered would become a cornerstone of Mesoamerican timekeeping, eventually adopted and refined by the Maya. And let's not forget the ball game, a sport that continued to win fans long after the Olmecs had left the proverbial stadium. They were the ancient world's equivalent of a one-hit wonder, but with a hit so catchy, it influenced generations. Now, let's draw some parallels to our modern world, because history loves to repeat itself like your favorite Netflix series. The environmental challenges the Olmecs faced may sound eerily familiar. Climate change and resource depletion are hurdles we still grapple with today. The Olmecs remind us that even the mightiest can fall if they ignore the signs of an angry Earth. It's a cautionary tale that screams, take care of your planet, or else. The Olmec story also speaks to the fragility of power and the importance of adaptability. Their decline serves as a reminder that no society is immune to change, and those who cling too tightly to the status quo may find themselves left in the dust. As we navigate our own societal challenges, the Olmec's fate nudges us to embrace innovation and inclusivity, lest we find ourselves in a similar historical bind. Yet, despite their eventual downfall, the Olmec civilization continues to captivate our imagination. Maybe it's the allure of those giant stone heads, like ancient puzzle pieces begging to be solved. Or perhaps it's their role as cultural pioneers, the trailblazers who set the stage for the grand Mesoamerican civilizations that followed. Whatever the reason, the Olmecs remain a testament to the enduring human spirit, a civilization that dared to dream big, innovating and influencing long after their own stars had dimmed. So, what can we learn from the Olmecs? For starters, that greatness isn't just about size and spectacle, it's about legacy. The Olmecs remind us that the seeds we plant today can bear fruit for generations to come. They show us the power of cultural exchange, of blending ideas and innovations to create something new and remarkable. As we close the book on the Olmec saga, remember that their story is more than just an ancient tale. It's a reflection of human resilience, creativity, and the relentless pursuit of progress. The Olmecs may have disappeared from the physical world, but their influence is etched into the very fabric of history, a legacy that continues to inspire challenge, and remind us of the boundless possibilities that arise when we dare to dream, innovate, and connect across time. In the bustling cacophony of 6th century BCE China, the Zhou dynasty was like a chaotic open mic night where everyone had something to say, but no one could agree on the set list. The political scene was as stable as a one-legged stool in a windstorm. Imagine a world where the ruling class couldn't hold onto power if it was Velcroed to them. That's the kind of anarchy our philosophical hero, Laozi, was born into, an era where a quiet life seemed as appealing as a silent disco. The Zhou dynasty, in its later years, was a hotbed of philosophical ferment, a veritable philosophical Coachella. Everyone from Confucius to Sun Tzu was airing their wisdom for anyone who'd listen, or had no choice but to listen because they were stuck in the same messy political marsh pit. Laozi, whose name means Old Master, was said to have been born in 604 BCE, although pinpointing his birthday is about as easy as nailing jelly to a tree. But hey, who needs exact dates when you've got timeless wisdom? The Zhou rulers started off strong around 1046 BCE, but by Laozi's time, their iron grip on power had rusted to a feeble clasp. The Eastern Zhou period, particularly the Spring and Autumn period, 770-476 BCE, was a time of fractured states and constant conflict. Picture 170 plus small states battling it out like contestants on a reality show where the prize was not getting conquered. The king was more of a figurehead, with regional lords treating their territories like personal fiefdoms. The whole scenario was a political free-for-all, with enough backstabbing and intrigue to fill a season of Game of Thrones. In this environment, philosophical thought wasn't just a pastime, it was a survival mechanism. The chaos was a breeding ground for new ideas, much like how a little bit of mold can turn milk into cheese. It's no wonder that thinkers like Confucius and Laozi emerged, each offering their own recipe for societal harmony. Confucius was all about structure and hierarchy, like a strict parent who insists on dinner at 6 p.m. sharp. Laozi, on the other hand, was the cool uncle who knew that sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to step back and let it unravel on its own. Laozi's teachings, encapsulated in the Tao Te Ching, are all about the Tao, or the way. It's the cosmic principle that suggests the universe operates in a harmonious flow, and trying to control it is as futile as trying to herd cats. In a world where everyone else was trying to outshout the chaos, Laozi was whispering wisdom from the sidelines, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the best way to deal with life's chaos was to embrace it with a shrug and a knowing smile. The appeal of Laozi's philosophy wasn't just in its content, but in its timing. The Zhou dynasty's decline was a symphony of discord, and Laozi's call for simplicity and natural order was the gentle lullaby people didn't know they needed. In a society where swords and shields often spoke louder than words, Laozi's teachings were a reminder that sometimes the softest voice carries the farthest. But why, you might wonder, would Laozi, a guy who could have been a star in the philosophical arena, choose a life of obscurity? Think of it this way. In a world where everyone was trying to be a headline, Laozi was content being a footnote, knowing that footnotes often carry the most insightful truths. He preferred the quiet, the understated, the path of least resistance, embodying the very principles he espoused. After all, when the world is a circus, sometimes the best seat is in the quietest corner. And so, while the Zhou dynasty's rulers were busy trying to keep their heads above water in a sea of chaos, Laozi was quietly observing from the shoreline, his teachings like ripples on a pond, subtle yet far-reaching. His decision to step away from the chaos was less about running from reality, and more about finding a reality worth embracing. A life of simplicity, for Laozi, was not a retreat but a triumph, a way to live in harmony with the world rather than in constant battle against it. As we dive deeper into Laozi's life and teachings in the coming segments, remember that behind every great philosopher is a world in turmoil, and sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from shouting above the din, but from listening to the silence. And so, as the ripples of Laozi's wisdom quietly spread, we find ourselves at the legendary fork in his life path, the moment he supposedly ditched the Zhou court like last season's fashion. Now, let's set the scene. Laozi, the enigmatic sage, was said to have held the position of an archivist or librarian at the Zhou court. Sounds prestigious, right? Well, hold your applause. In a world where bureaucratic chaos reigned supreme, being a librarian was less about shushing rowdy readers and more about navigating a labyrinthine mess of scrolls and records with all the glamour of a medieval paper pusher. The Jus Court wasn't exactly a well-oiled machine. Think of it as a giant, unwieldy beast, lumbering under the weight of its own inefficiency. The bureaucracy was as tangled as a box of old Christmas lights, and someone like Laozi, who prized simplicity above all, likely found the whole ordeal as appealing as a root canal. So, when he decided to pack up and leave, it was more a case of self-preservation than an epic mic drop. Now, about that departure. Legend has it that Laozi rode off on an ox. Picture it, the philosophical heavyweight trotting off into the sunset, robes billowing, a living embodiment of his teachings about going with the flow. It's a romantic image, I'll give you that, but let's break it down. Traveling 500 kilometers on an ox is about as glamorous as hitching a ride on a sloth. Sure, it makes for a great story, but the practicalities were far from poetic. The journey from the Jus Court to the western border would have taken weeks, possibly months, with an ox's leisurely pace clocking in at a blistering 5 kilometers per hour on a good day. And while we're talking logistics, let's consider the road conditions. We're not talking smooth highways and scenic vistas. This was 6th century BC China, where roads were more like dirt tracks, and where the conditions could turn a simple journey into a mud-splattered nightmare. The romantic notion of Laozi's departure on an ox skips over the realities. The sore backside, the blistering sun, and the ever-present threat of bandits who saw lone travelers as walking jackpots. It's easy to see why this image persists. After all, who doesn't love a good underdog story, the sage on his humble steed, embodying the very essence of his teachings? But the truth is, Laozi's departure was less about an idyllic journey and more about a calculated escape from the chaos of court life. The journey symbolized a return to nature, a rejection of the artificial constructs of society that he so often critiqued in his writings. As for his role at the Jus Court, the idea that Laozi was a librarian is steeped in speculation. Records are sketchy at best, and much of what we know about Laozi is a cocktail of historical fact, myth, and outright guesswork. Being an archivist in ancient China could have meant anything from managing the royal library to acting as a custodian of court documents. Either way, it was a position that required a sharp mind and a knack for organization, qualities that Laozi, as a proponent of simplicity and order, would have had in spades. Yet, in a system as convoluted as the Jus bureaucracy, even the most brilliant mind would struggle to make sense of the chaos. It's no wonder Laozi chose to leave, seeking solace in the simplicity of nature rather than the suffocating confines of court life. His departure was a statement, a living embodiment of his philosophy, a reminder that sometimes the most profound wisdom comes not from the grand halls of power, but from the quiet corners of the world. In leaving the court, Laozi wasn't just stepping away from a job. He was stepping into his own legend. His journey, whether on an ox or otherwise, became a symbol of his teachings, a testament to the power of simplicity and the pursuit of harmony with the natural world. While the romanticism of his departure endures, the reality speaks to a man who was as pragmatic as he was philosophical, a thinker who understood that sometimes the best way to make a statement is to walk away. As we continue to unravel the tapestry of Laozi's life and teachings, remember that behind every great legend is a kernel of truth, often obscured by layers of myth. It's our task to peel back these layers, to find the real story beneath the romantic veneer. There's much more to explore in Laozi's journey, and we're just getting started. Stay tuned, because the road ahead is as winding and intriguing as the ox path Laozi himself might have once traveled. As we continue to unravel the tapestry of Laozi's life and teachings, let's dive into the Tao Te Ching, the philosophical enigma that Laozi supposedly left as a parting gift. If you're picturing a dramatic farewell scene where Laozi rides into the sunset, tossing scrolls of wisdom like confetti, it's time for a reality check. The creation of the Tao Te Ching is less grand sage farewell and more seasoned philosopher drafting a leave-me-alone manual. Legend has it that as Laozi reached the western border, he was stopped by a guard named Yin Zai, who asked him to jot down his wisdom before exiting stage left. Picture Yin Zai as the bouncer of the ancient world, not letting anyone through without a parting gift. So Laozi, likely weary from his arc-striding escapade, and more than a tad exasperated, obliged. He penned the Tao Te Ching, a text of around 5,000 characters, which is about the length of 2 modern book chapters. Not exactly a tome, but enough to keep inquisitive minds busy for centuries. Now, let's talk about the Tao Te Ching itself. It's a work of philosophical poetry, a tapestry woven with paradoxes and enigmas that would make a cryptographer sweat. Laozi's verses are like ancient fortune cookies, each one offering a nugget of wisdom wrapped in a riddle. Take, for instance, the famous line, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." It's a Hallmark card classic now, but in Laozi's time, it was a profound reminder that even the longest and most daunting ventures have a humble beginning. The beauty of the Tao Te Ching lies in its simplicity and depth, a duality that makes it both accessible and endlessly interpretable. It's the philosophical equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, offering insights into governance, personal conduct, and the nature of the universe. One verse reads, "The more laws and restrictions there are, the poorer people become." It's a line that wouldn't be out of place in a modern debate on government overreach. Laozi was essentially saying that overregulation stifles prosperity, a truth that transcends time and borders. But let's not get too misty-eyed just yet. Laozi's verses, while profound, were also practical. They offered life hacks for an era where survival often depended on staying under the radar. Consider the verse, "When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you." In a world where social hierarchy was as rigid as the Great Wall, this was radical stuff. It was a call to authenticity that still resonates in today's Instagram-filtered society. One could argue that Laozi's teachings were less about spiritual enlightenment and more about coping strategies for a chaotic world. His advice to yield and overcome was not just a spiritual mantra, but a survival tactic in a time when brute force often ruled the day. In a society where might made right, Laozi's advocacy for softness and yielding was akin to telling a room full of bodybuilders to try yoga. Economically, the Tao Te Ching had its fingers on the pulse of society's ills. Laozi warned against the accumulation of wealth, stating, "The more that you acquire, the less you know." In a period marked by vast disparities between the haves and the have-nots, this was a poignant critique of materialism. It was a reminder that true wisdom often comes from knowing what to let go of, not what to hold on to, a lesson that many of today's hoarders of wealth might do well to heed. While the Tao Te Ching has been embraced as a spiritual guide, it's crucial to remember that its roots are firmly planted in the socio-political soil of Laozi's time. It was as much a commentary on the state of the world as it was a philosophical treatise. Laozi wasn't just waxing poetic about the cosmos. He was offering a blueprint for living in harmony with it, a guide to navigating the treacherous waters of human society with grace and humility. The creation of the Tao Te Ching, therefore, was less about Laozi's swan song and more about a seasoned thinker leaving behind a toolkit for the perplexed. It was his way of saying, here's how you deal with the chaos without losing your mind. And in a world that often feels as chaotic as an unsupervised circus, who couldn't use a little bit of that wisdom? Yet, despite its timeless appeal, the Tao Te Ching is shrouded in mystery. Was it really penned by Laozi, or is it a compilation of oral traditions attributed to him over centuries? The jury's still out. What we do know is that the text's impact has been profound, shaping not only Chinese thought, but also influencing Western philosophy, from the transcendentalists to the beats. This little book of wisdom has survived not just the ravages of time, but also the whims of interpretation. It's been translated more times than Shakespeare, with each version offering a new lens through which to view its teachings. Whether you see it as a spiritual guide, a philosophical treatise, or an ancient self-help book, the Tao Te Ching continues to captivate and challenge readers, urging us to find balance in a world of extremes. As we continue our exploration of Laozi's legacy, remember that the Tao Te Ching is both a mirror and a window. It's a reflection of its time and a lens through which we can view our own. There's much more to uncover about Laozi's life and teachings, so stay tuned as we delve deeper into the enduring mysteries of this enigmatic figure. The journey, as they say, is just beginning. As Laozi's ox plodded westward, his teachings found their feet in ways he might never have imagined. Like a philosophical Johnny Appleseed, Laozi left behind seeds of thought that would grow into the mighty oak of Taoism, a belief system that would spread its branches far and wide across China and beyond. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't an overnight success story. In fact, the spread of Taoism was more of a slow burn than a flash in the pan. In the centuries following Laozi's departure, Taoism began to take root, particularly during the tumultuous times of the Warring States period, 475-221 BCE. Picture this, a landscape of fractured kingdoms, each vying for dominance like squabbling siblings, fighting over the last slice of pizza. In this chaotic setting, Laozi's call for harmony and simplicity struck a chord with those weary of constant conflict. Taoism's emphasis on living in accordance with the Tao, the natural order of the universe, offered a refreshing alternative to the cutthroat world of power struggles and political machinations. But Taoism didn't spread in a vacuum. It had to contend with the heavyweight champion of Chinese philosophy, Confucianism. Confucianism, with its rigid social hierarchies and emphasis on filial piety, was the philosophical equivalent of a stern school principal, insisting that everyone play by the rules and dress appropriately for class. In contrast, Taoism was like the laid-back art teacher, encouraging students to express themselves and find their own path. The clash between these two schools of thought was as much a cultural battle as it was philosophical. Confucius and Laozi were like the Lennon and McCartney of Chinese philosophy, each offering a different tune to the same chaotic world. Confucius sang the praises of duty, order, and respect for authority, while Laozi hummed a tune of spontaneity, freedom, and letting things be. Their ideas sparked debates that would echo through the ages, influencing not only philosophers, but also rulers, scholars, and common folk alike. So why did Taoism catch on? The answer lies in the economic and social realities of the time. During periods of upheaval, when the social fabric was as frayed as an old sweater, Taoism's message of simplicity resonated with those caught in the turmoil. For many, the promise of living in harmony with nature offered a sense of stability and peace that was sorely lacking in the violent, competitive world of warring states. Moreover, Taoism's appeal wasn't just philosophical, it was practical. While Confucianism emphasized education and social responsibility, Taoism offered a more accessible path to enlightenment. You didn't need to be a scholar or a noble to embrace the Tao. It was a philosophy that spoke to the everyman, with its emphasis on following one's own path and finding balance in a chaotic world. In this way, Taoism was like the ancient equivalent of a viral TED talk, offering wisdom that was both profound and approachable. And let's not forget the economic factors at play. In a society where the gap between rich and poor was as vast as the Great Wall, Taoism's critique of wealth and materialism struck a nerve. Laozi's teachings encouraged people to find contentment with less, to live simply, and to focus on what truly mattered. This was a radical notion in a world where status and possessions often defined one's worth. But as with any good story, there's a twist. As time went on, Taoism itself began to evolve, taking on elements of mysticism and ritual that would have made Laozi raise an eyebrow. By the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE, 220 C, Taoism had become an organized religion, complete with priests, temples, and a pantheon of deities. It was a far cry from the simple, naturalistic teachings of Laozi, but it spoke to the human need for structure and community, offering rituals and practices that helped people navigate the complexities of life. This evolution wasn't without its challenges. Taoism's mystical elements often put it at odds with the more rational, pragmatic Confucianism, leading to tensions that would simmer for centuries. Yet, despite these differences, both philosophies managed to coexist, each offering valuable insights into the human condition. In fact, many Chinese thinkers and rulers would come to blend elements of both, creating a unique philosophical tapestry that drew from the strengths of each tradition. The spread of Taoism also had a profound impact on Chinese culture, influencing art, literature, and even medicine. The Taoist emphasis on harmony and balance found expression in everything from landscape painting to martial arts, shaping the aesthetic sensibilities of a nation. And let's not overlook traditional Chinese medicine. with its focus on holistic health and the balance of energies, a direct reflection of Taoist principles. As we continue to explore the legacy of Laozi and the spread of Taoism, it's clear that the teachings of the old master resonated far beyond his own time. They offered a path to peace and understanding in a world that often seemed bent on tearing itself apart. And while the romantic image of Laozi riding off into the sunset remains a powerful symbol, the real story is one of enduring influence and quiet revolution. So, as we prepare to delve deeper into the impact of Laozi's teachings, remember that the journey of Taoism is as much about the people who embraced it as it is about the sage who inspired it. Stay tuned for more twists and turns in this philosophical saga, because the story of Taoism is far from over. In a world where the only constant is change, the wisdom of Laozi continues to offer a beacon of hope and understanding, a testament to the power of ideas to shape the course of history. With Taoism's roots firmly planted, let's shift our gaze to the enduring legacy of Laozi, the enigmatic sage whose teachings have outlasted the crumbling walls of ancient dynasties. From the Han dynasty's imperial corridors to the buzzing offices of modern-day startups, Laozi's influence has echoed through the ages like a particularly catchy tune you just can't shake. This guy's impact is the kind of enduring that makes Rolling Stones tours look like passing fads. First off, let's address the elephant, or should I say arcs, in the room. Laozi's life story is a murky blend of historical breadcrumbs and mythological souffle. Was he a real person, or just a composite of ancient wisdom figures? The debate is older than your grandmother's china cabinet. The earliest references to Laozi appear in texts like the records of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian, dating back to around the 1st century BCE, some 500 years after Laozi supposedly lived. Sima Qian's portrayal is part biography, part legend, part choose-your-own adventure. It paints Laozi as a sage advisor who preferred the quiet life over courtly chaos, but historical verification. It's as elusive as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Despite the sketchy details, the appeal of Laozi's mythical persona is undeniable. The image of a wise old man riding an ox into the sunset is downright cinematic. It's like the ancient Chinese version of a cowboy riding off into the horizon, a lone figure against a backdrop of uncertainty and possibility. This narrative is irresistible, capturing our imaginations, even if it sidesteps reality like a politician dodging a tricky question. Now, onto the Tao Te Ching, Laozi's supposed magnum opus. If Laozi had a nickel for every time someone misquoted it, he'd have a nice little fortune stashed away, and he'd probably advise you to let it go. The Tao Te Ching has been translated into over 250 languages, outselling even the most popular self-help books by a margin wider than the Great Wall. It's a testament to its universal appeal and the timelessness of its insights. Whether you're a 3rd century BCE farmer or a 21st century tech guru, there's something in its pages that resonates deeply. Fast forward a few centuries, and you have Taoism influencing everything from the arts to medicine to martial arts. Ever heard of Bruce Lee? His philosophy of being like water is a direct nod to Laozi's teachings. The Taoist principle of Wu Wei, or effortless action, is as relevant to a martial artist as it is to a modern-day CEO trying to streamline operations. In fact, some of today's corporate retreats, the kind where you pay an ungodly sum to find your inner peace, might as well hand out copies of the Tao Te Ching as parting gifts. It's the original how-to guide on staying chill while the world around you insists on losing its marbles. Economically, Laozi's teachings offer a counterpoint to the relentless drive for more wealth, more power, more stuff. In a society obsessed with growth and accumulation, Laozi's call for simplicity and contentment seems almost subversive. His advice to know contentment, and you will suffer no disgrace, challenges the modern mantra of bigger is better, offering a different kind of wealth that can't be measured in stark portfolios or square footage. Yet, for all its ancient wisdom, Taoism has not been immune to the trials of history. During periods of political upheaval, Taoist temples and texts faced suppression, particularly under regimes that favored Confucian ideals. But like the resilient bamboo that bends without breaking, Taoism endured, finding new ways to emerge and adapt. Its principles have inspired resistance and resilience, offering solace in times of crisis and upheaval. In the modern world, Laozi's influence can be seen in unexpected places, from the rise of mindfulness meditation to the popularity of Eastern philosophies in Western culture. Apps that guide you through breathing exercises or encourage you to just be are essentially digital echoes of Laozi's teachings. In a world that's constantly plugged in, Laozi's emphasis on stillness and simplicity is a refreshing counterbalance, a reminder to step back, breathe, and let the universe unfold as it will. And let's not forget the scholarly debates that have been sparked by Laozi's ideas. Academics and philosophers have spent lifetimes analyzing the Tao Te Ching, dissecting its verses with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. Each interpretation brings new layers of understanding, adding to the rich tapestry of Laozi's legacy. Whether you see it as a spiritual guide, a philosophical treatise, or a historical curiosity, the Tao Te Ching continues to challenge and inspire, offering a mirror to our own experiences and beliefs. In the end, Laozi's teachings are like a quiet stream, winding through the landscape of human history. They whisper of a different way of being, one that embraces balance and harmony over conflict and control. His legacy is a testament to the power of ideas to transcend time and place, to speak to the deepest parts of our humanity, and to offer a path forward in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain. So, as we wrap up our journey through the life and legacy of Laozi, remember that the story of this ancient sage is as much about us as it is about him. It's a story of enduring wisdom, of the search for meaning and peace in a turbulent world. And while the details of Laozi's life may be shrouded in mystery, the impact of his teachings is as clear as the stars on a moonlit night, a guiding light for those who seek it, a reminder that sometimes the greatest truths are found in the simplest of places. Ever thought about life on the run in the wilds of 19th century Australia? Well, buckle up, because you're not just any runaway. You're a bushranger. That's right, you're swapping the comfort of civilization, if you can call it that, for the rough and tumble existence of an outlaw. But before you start romanticizing the idea of being a rugged Robin Hood figure, let's dig into what really made bushranging a thing. It all starts in the early 1800s with the delightful penal colonies. Australia, the land of koalas, kangaroos, and back then, a whole lot of convicts. Britain, dealing with its overflowing prisons, decided to ship its undesirables halfway across the globe. Talk about a one-way ticket to nowhere. Between 1788 and 1868, roughly 162,000 convicts made the journey to Australia. Each of them faced the choice: endure back-breaking labor in the colonies or make a break for it into the bush. Life in these penal colonies was no picnic. You, as a convict, were assigned to work on chain gangs, toiling from sunrise to sunset. If you were lucky, you might avoid the lashings. Yes, those were a thing. The penal system was designed to reform you through hard labor and strict discipline. But here's the kicker. Conditions were so harsh, they often pushed people into rebellion rather than submission. Now, it wasn't just the brutal conditions that made many convicts consider a career as a bushranger. Enter the economic backdrop of early Australian colonies. The economy here was as sturdy as a house of cards in a windstorm. Land was the currency of power, but for convicts, owning land was a pipe dream. With limited opportunities to earn a decent living, the bush offered a rough freedom and occasionally a lucrative score. Transportation was another key player in this saga. The sheer vastness of the Australian outback was both a curse and a blessing. It was a place where the law's long arm was frustratingly short. Roads, more like dusty trails, law enforcement, scarce at best. You could vanish into the bush and become a ghost, a spectre lurking just beyond the reach of the authorities. Now, about that romantic image of the bushranger, the daring rebel, the champion of the downtrodden. It's a narrative that's stuck because, let's face it, we all love a good anti-hero. But the truth isn't so glamorous. Most bushrangers were more like desperate bandits than noble robbers. Violence was a staple of their existence. They didn't just rob banks, they often targeted settlers, travelers, and anyone vulnerable enough to fall prey to their raids. Some bushrangers were known to be particularly ruthless, like the infamous John Black Caesar, considered Australia's first bushranger. His life was less of a Robin Hood tale and more a grim reality of survival and notoriety. Speaking of notoriety, let's not forget about the media of the time. Newspapers spun tales that oscillated between vilifying and venerating these outlaws, depending on what sold more papers. The public, intrigued by these tales of derring-do, often found themselves caught between condemning and covertly cheering on the bushrangers. After all, who doesn't love a bit of scandal mixed with adventure? But here's a reality check. The life expectancy of a bushranger was as dismal as a convict's prospects. Many ended up swinging from the gallows, courtesy of the colonial authorities who were keen on setting an example. The average career in bushranging was short-lived, often ending in a violent death or capture. The romantic allure of freedom came with a steep price, your life, more often than not. So, with the stage set, you find yourself teetering on the edge of this outlaw life. The bush calls, promising freedom from chains and a chance to carve your own destiny in a land that's as unforgiving as it is wild. But remember, it's not all campfires and camaraderie out there. It's a harsh dance with danger, where every step could be your last. As you contemplate this leap into the unknown, keep in mind that the legends of bushrangers may shine bright, but the shadows they cast are long and dark. And so, the stage is set for us to meet some of the most notorious figures in the Bushranger Hall of Infamy, names that have become as synonymous with Australian folklore as Vegemite and kangaroos. Let's start with the man, the myth, the legend, Ned Kelly. Born in June 1854 in Victoria, Kelly's life was a whirlwind of rebellion and resilience. The son of Irish immigrants, young Ned was no stranger to the harsh glare of colonial authority. His family was perpetually on the radar of law enforcement, thanks partly to their less-than-stellar reputation and a knack for skirting the letter of the law. Ned's journey into outlaw celebrity status began in earnest after a kerfuffle in 1878 that involved a certain Constable Fitzpatrick, who had a penchant for bending the truth like a yoga instructor. The altercation led to Ned's mother being arrested, and the Kellys feeling more than a little hard done by. Like any good tale of rebellion, this one escalated quickly. Ned and his gang, comprising his brother Dan and a couple of mates, took to the bush, declaring open season on the police and those they deemed their oppressors. Here's where the myth-making really kicks in. The Kelly gang, with their suits of homemade armor, yes, they literally wore metal suits like medieval knights, became the stuff of legend. Imagine Iron Man, but with more rust and less tech. They pulled off a series of bank robberies, including a particularly bold one at Euroa in 1878, where they relieved the bank of about £2,000. That's roughly $250,000 in today's money, a tidy sum for a gang of bush outlaws. They even burned mortgage documents during one of their raids, earning a Robin Hood-esque reputation for sticking it to the banks. But let's not get too swept away by the romance of it all. The Kelly gang's escapades were often violent, and their armor didn't make them invincible. Now, if Ned Kelly was the rock star of the bushranging world, Ben Hall was its brooding poet. Born in New South Wales in 1837, Hall had a slightly different journey. Initially a successful grazier, he found himself drawn into the world of crime more by circumstance than outright defiance. Hall's downfall began with a series of unfortunate events that seemed ripped from the script of a particularly grim soap opera. His wife left him, taking their son along, and he was arrested but later acquitted of highway robbery. By the time he was released, the damage was done. Hall turned to bushranging, not so much out of rebellion, but necessity. And what a bushranger he became. Hall was known for his meticulous planning and smooth operations. His gang once took control of the town of Canoindra for 3 days, treating the residents to food, drink, and entertainment on the house. The media, hungry for stories that sold papers, painted Hall as a gentleman thief, a man of principle in a lawless land. But let's not forget the other side of the coin. Hall's life was peppered with violence and betrayal. His end came not in a blaze of glory, but an ambush in 1865, shot down by police in a move that was more execution than arrest. Now, we can't talk about bushrangers without mentioning the role of the media. Newspapers of the late 19th century were the social media of their day, sensational, opinionated, and often a little loose with the facts. They turned bushrangers into folklore figures, romanticizing their deeds while glossing over the bloodier bits. It was a time when the public yearned for heroes and anti-heroes, and the Bushrangers fit the bill perfectly. They were the rebels against the system, one that many felt was stacked against the common man. But let's face it, reality was a far cry from the stories. Life as a bushranger was brutal and short-lived. Average career wasn't something you boast about at a family reunion. Most bushrangers ended up dead or behind bars long before they hit middle age. The colonial authorities were relentless in their pursuit, eager to stamp out any semblance of romantic rebellion. They passed laws like the Felons Apprehension Act, which allowed bushrangers to be shot on sight. Talk about zero tolerance. So, while the legends of Kelly and Hall live on, immortalized in songs, books, and films, the truth is far less glamorous. These men lived hard, violent lives, often forced by circumstance more than choice. Their stories are a mix of desperation, daring, and defiance, a cocktail that has intrigued Australians for generations. But as we lift the veil and peer into the reality of their existence, it's clear that the bushranger myth is just that, a myth, one that we can appreciate for its storytelling while acknowledging the gritty truth underneath. As we ponder the legacy of these notorious figures, remember that the allure of the bushranger is as much about us as it is about them. We love the idea of the underdog, the rebel with a cause, even if that cause is sometimes blurred by the harsh glare of reality. But hold that thought, because our journey through the wild world of 19th century Australia is far from over. We've just scratched the surface of what makes these figures both legendary and tragically human. So, as we dive deeper into the saga of these notorious outlaws, it's time to pull back the curtain on the colonial government's efforts to rein in the bushranging madness. Because let's be honest, the authorities weren't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs while bushrangers were gallivanting across the outback like rock stars on a world tour. First up, legislation. Now, if you think politicians today are heavy-handed, the blokes running the show in 19th century Australia were downright draconian. The Felons Apprehension Act of 1865 was their piece de resistance, a law that essentially said, hey, if you're a bushranger, we can legally shoot you on sight. Imagine having a law with your name on it, and not in a good way. This act was a clear message. The colonial government was done playing hide and seek with outlaws. If you were caught, it wasn't just game over, it was life over. But wait, there's more. The mounted police were the next weapon in the colonial arsenal. These guys were the cavalry, literally. Dressed in their dapper uniforms, they were the embodiment of law and order, galloping across the landscape in pursuit of the outlaws. Established in 1825, the mounted police were intended to be the long arm of the law, extending its reach into the rugged, bush-covered heart of the continent. They were the original Australian cowboys, only their cattle rustlers were armed to the teeth and more interested in robbing banks than herding livestock. And then there were the informants. Because what's a good manhunt without a little insider info? Right. The colonial authorities quickly realized that bushrangers were often protected by a network of sympathizers, locals who either admired these rebels or had a bone to pick with the police themselves. The government, ever resourceful, started offering rewards for information leading to arrests. Imagine the tension at the local pub, where every nod and wink could mean an extra quid in someone's pocket, or a knife in the back if word got out you were a snitch. All these efforts didn't just make the bushrangers' lives difficult. They also had a ripple effect on the rural communities themselves. You see, while some locals might have been sipping bushranger Kool-Aid, others were just trying to get by without having their livelihoods turned upside down. When a band of outlaws rolled into town, it wasn't just an inconvenience. It could be an economic disaster. Banks were robbed, yes, but so were supply wagons and stores, and sometimes entire towns were held hostage. It was like living in a Wild West movie, but without the comforting knowledge that John Wayne would eventually ride in to save the day. The economic impact of bushrangers was as unpredictable as the weather. On one hand, they disrupted trade routes, making it difficult for supplies to reach their destinations, which in turn jacked up prices faster than you could say inflation. On the other hand, the presence of bushrangers could sometimes boost local economies, albeit indirectly. Tensions and the need for protection meant more business for blacksmiths. Gotta have those horses shod for a quick getaway, and inns often saw increased patronage from lawmen passing through. It was a strange symbiosis of chaos and commerce. And here's another wrinkle in the tapestry, the social divide between the haves and have-nots. The bushrangers, in many ways, were the poster boys for class resentment. They were often seen as sticking it to the wealthy landowners and corrupt officials, the very people who seemed to have life handed to them on a silver platter, while everyone else scrabbled for crumbs. Whether this perception was entirely accurate is another matter, but it certainly fueled the bushranger legend. This tension between local sympathizers and law enforcement created an atmosphere that was more charged than a kangaroo court during a lightning storm. Cops weren't always the good guys in the eyes of the public. They were often seen as the strong arm of an oppressive government that cared little for the common man's plight. So when a bushranger gang rolled into town, some folks might have been secretly cheering them on, if only for the brief thrill of seeing authority taken down a peg. But make no mistake, this was a dangerous game. Harboring a bushranger was no small crime, and the penalties could be severe. So, as we peel back the layers of this complex narrative, it's clear that bushranging was no simple tale of good versus evil. It was a swirling storm of social, economic, and political forces, each feeding into the myth and reality of the bushranger experience. As romantic as the legend might be, the truth was a gritty, blood-and-dust affair, where every decision carried a weighty consequence. These were desperate men in desperate times, living lives that were as thrilling as they were short. And as we ponder their legacy, we're left with a world where the line between hero and villain is as blurry as a heat haze on the horizon. But let's not pack up our swags just yet. The story of Australia's bushrangers is far from over, and there's still plenty to unravel. We've only scratched the surface of the drama, the danger, and the daring that defined this wild chapter of history. So stay tuned, because the Outback still holds more tales of intrigue, betrayal, and a fight for survival in a land as unforgiving as it is beautiful. And speaking of wild tales, the story of bushranging isn't just about outlaws with a penchant for rusted armor and local notoriety. It's also about how the March of Progress, like that uninvited guest at the bushranger party, reshaped the landscape of crime itself. Now, let's talk about the 19th century's version of a smartphone, the telegraph. This nifty little invention, which seemed like something straight out of steampunk science fiction, started flickering to life in Australia around the mid-1850. By 1872, the overland telegraph line was completed, effectively plugging Australia into the global grid. For law enforcement, this was like swapping a carrier pigeon for a jetpack. Suddenly, they could send messages faster than a bushranger could saddle up a horse. The days of outlaws leisurely galloping away while the authorities were stuck scribbling notes were numbered. And then there was the railway. Ah, the iron horse, chugging its way across the vast Australian landscape, bringing with it a whole new era of connectivity and commerce. By the late 1800, rail networks were crisscrossing the colonies like the world's largest game of tic-tac-toe. For the bushrangers, this was a logistical nightmare. The railway shrank the vastness of the outback, making it easier for the police to move troops and resources quickly. It was like trying to play hide and seek in a room full of mirrors. These technological leaps didn't just mean faster communication and transportation, they fundamentally altered the game. The bush was no longer the impenetrable fortress it once was. It was as if the authorities had finally found the light switch and were illuminating all the shadowy corners where bushrangers used to hide. Now, if you're thinking that this made bushranging about as appealing as a leaky dinghy in a shark-infested ocean, you'd be spot on. The romance of being an outlaw began to lose its luster when faced with the cold, hard reality of progress. The economic landscape was shifting too. The gold rushes, which had initially fueled the bushranging boom by creating hordes of wealthy yet isolated targets, were tapering off. With fewer glittering prizes to snatch, the risk-reward ratio started to look less like a swashbuckling adventure and more like a fool's errand. As the 19th century drew to a close, the romantic image of the bushranger began to fade, replaced by the grim truth that the world was moving on. But not all bushrangers took this lying down. Enter Captain Thunderbolt, aka Frederick Ward, the last of the gentleman bushrangers. Ward managed to evade capture for nearly 6 years, quite a feat considering the technological advancements at play. He was the Houdini of the bush, but even he couldn't outrun the inevitable forever. In 1870, He was shot and killed by police, marking the end of an era. And then there was the infamous Kelly gang's last stand at the siege of Glenrowan in 1880. Their audacious plan to derail a train full of police officers was foiled, leading to a brutal showdown. Ned Kelly, clad in his iconic armor, was captured and eventually hanged. It was a dramatic finale worthy of a blockbuster, but it also underscored the harsh reality. The days of bushrangers as folk heroes were over. As the dust settled on this chaotic chapter of Australian history, the bushrangers who survived found themselves in a world that had little room for their kind. The economic and technological strides made by the colonies didn't just close off avenues for crime. They also opened up legitimate opportunities. The booming wool industry, for example, offered ex-bushrangers a chance to trade in their guns for shears and find a new kind of freedom in honest work. So, while the myth of the bushranger lives on in ballads and tall tales, the reality was far more grounded and grim. These were desperate men in desperate times, clinging to a way of life that was rapidly vanishing. The telegraphs and railways weren't just tools of oppression. They were instruments of change, heralding a new era where the bushranger legend was left to gather dust in the annals of history. But don't hang up your swag just yet. There's more to explore in the tale of these infamous outlaws and the world they inhabited. We've got one more chapter to unpack, where we'll delve into the cultural legacy of bushrangers and how their stories continue to echo through the ages. So, stay tuned as we saddle up for the final stretch of our journey through the wild and woolly world of 19th century Australia. And just like that, we're back in the saddle, ready to tackle the final chapter of our rollicking ride through the saga of Australia's bushrangers. So, let's dive into the legacy these notorious figures left behind. Because if there's one thing Australians love almost as much as a backyard barbecue, it's a good yarn about outlaws with a cause. First things first, bushrangers have been immortalized in Australian folklore like Vegemite in the National Pantry, an acquired taste, but undeniably iconic. From penny dreadfuls to modern cinema, the tales of these outlaws have been spun, respun, and then spun some more. Why? Well, for one, their stories tick all the boxes of a gripping narrative. Adventure, danger, rebellion, and a dash of moral ambiguity that keeps things spicy. Take Ned Kelly, for instance. This guy's practically a national treasure, despite the whole outlaw thing. His life, and particularly his last stand, has inspired countless retellings. The 1906 silent film, The Story of the Kelly Gang, is credited as the world's first feature-length film. Talk about making history right. More recently, the 2003 movie, Ned Kelly, starring Heath Ledger, reignited interest in Kelly's tale. It's a story that's been told and retold, like a campfire tale that just gets better with every telling. And it's not just movies. Literature has had a field day with bushrangers, too. Peter Carey's True History of the Kelly Gang, winner of the 2001 Booker Prize, offers a fictionalized account of Kelly's life that delves into his psyche, exploring what made him tick. Carey's book, like many other works, blurs the line between hero and villain, probing the complex social fabric that could produce such a figure. Now, why the fascination with these outlaws? Well, for starters, bushrangers embody a certain Aussie spirit, one that values independence, defiance, and a healthy mistrust of authority. They were the original rebels without a cause, or perhaps with too many causes to count. In a land where the government often seemed like a distant overlord, the bushrangers represented a fight against the system. They were the underdogs, flipping the bird to the establishment, much like a certain underarm bowling incident in cricket history that stirred national pride. But here's the twist. While we love to romanticize these figures, the reality was far grittier. Most bushrangers weren't gallant folk heroes. They were desperate men doing desperate things. The economic context of the time, a world where opportunities were as scarce as a koala in a snowstorm, drove many to a life of crime. The land was vast, the law was distant, and survival often meant bending the rules until they snapped. And yet the romance endures. Why? Because bushrangers, in their way, reflect the Australian national identity, one that revels in rugged individualism and a fair go for all. Their stories resonate because they tap into a deep-seated yearning for freedom and justice, even if their methods were questionable at best. But let's not forget the harsh realities that underpin these tales. The average bushranger's life was brutal and short. Most didn't make it past their 20s, meeting their end at the hands of the law or rival gangs. The mythologizing of their lives often glosses over the violence, the desperation, and the sheer grit needed to survive in the harsh Australian bush. It's a bit like looking at a painting without seeing the rough canvas beneath. As we wrap up this wild ride through history, it's worth pondering the blurred lines between legend and reality. Bushrangers had become part of Australia's cultural DNA, symbols of rebellion and resilience. But behind every romantic tale is a story of hardship, of men pushed to the fringes by an unforgiving world. In the end, the legacy of the Bushrangers is a testament to the power of storytelling. It shows how we, as humans, are drawn to tales of defiance and daring, even when the truth is far from pretty. We celebrate the myth while acknowledging the gritty reality, because in those murky waters lie the essence of our shared humanity, a mix of dreams and desperation, courage and chaos. So, as the dust settles on this chapter of history, remember that the stories we tell, and the stories we choose to believe, say as much about us as they do about the past. The Bushrangers may be gone, but their spirit lingers on, echoing through the ages like the haunting call of a didgeridoo in the outback night. And with that, my friends, our journey through the wild world of 19th century Australia comes to a close. It's been a wild ride through dust and legend, and I hope you enjoyed the trip as much as I did. Until next time, keep your swag packed and your imagination wilder than a kangaroo on the run. The scene is 322 BCE, and the Indian subcontinent is a swirling cauldron of power plays and intrigue, kind of like Game of Thrones, but with more elephants and fewer dragons. At the center of this geopolitical drama is a young man named Chandragupta Maurya. Picture him as a scrappy upstart with a talent for making friends in high places. Think of him as the original LinkedIn power user, except his connections were kings and generals instead of tech startups and CEO influencers. Chandragupta was born into a world where Alexander the Great's conquests had left a power vacuum larger than a black hole. When Alex decided to pack up and head west, he left behind a patchwork quilt of territories and client kings that were just ripe for the picking. Enter Chandragupta, who saw this chaos not as a problem, but as an opportunity. With the help of his mentor, Chanakya, an ancient Indian philosopher who could give Machiavelli a run for his money, Chandragupta set out to turn this fragmented landscape into the first major empire on the subcontinent. At about 20 years old, Chandragupta was kind of like an ancient startup founder who convinced venture capitalists, or in this case, armies, to buy into his vision. His first big move was to take on the Nanda Empire, which was ruling the Magadha region in northeastern India. The Nandas were rolling in dough and muscle, with a treasure trove that could make Scrooge McDuck's vault look like pocket change. But they were also unpopular. Think of them as the corporate overlords everyone loves to hate. Chandragupta, with Chanakya's sage advice, managed to gather enough support from disgruntled regions and ambitious generals to topple the Nandas around 321 BCE. Once he had his foot in the door, Chandragupta didn't waste time. He rapidly expanded his empire to cover northern India, stretching from the Bay of Bengal to the Arabian Sea. This wasn't just a land grab, it was a masterclass in strategic governance. Chandragupta understood that controlling such a vast territory required more than just brute force. He set up a centralized administration that could give today's bureaucracies a run for their money, complete with departments for everything from taxation to espionage. His empire was the ancient equivalent of a well-oiled machine, albeit one powered by human sweat and elephant power. Now, let's talk elephants. These majestic beasts were the tanks of the ancient world, and Chandragupta had them in spades. His army reportedly boasted 9,000 war elephants, which were basically the ancient world's version of a nuclear deterrent. When you've got thousands of pachyderms ready to trample your enemies, people tend to take your negotiating calls. But expanding an empire wasn't just about military might. It was also about alliances, and Chandragupta was a master diplomat. He knew when to wield the sword and when to extend a hand. One of his most significant diplomatic moves was marrying the daughter of Seleucus I, one of Alexander's former generals who controlled territories to the northwest. This marriage not only secured peace, but also brought 500 war elephants into his fold, strengthening his already formidable arsenal. As Chandragupta's empire grew, so did his legend. Thanks to Chanakya, his reign was immortalized in the Artha Shastra, an ancient Indian treatise on statecraft, economic policy, and military strategy. Think of it as the ultimate guidebook for how to run a country, with chapters that could easily be titled How to Win Friends and Influence Kingdoms, and the Art of Elephant Warfare. But let's not get too misty-eyed about this ancient empire builder. Chandragupta's rise wasn't just a series of noble conquests and wise governance. It was also a story of ruthless ambition and relentless pragmatism. His reign was marked by the harsh realities of ancient power struggles, where loyalty was often as temporary as the monsoon rains. The Mauryan Empire's success was built on both the grand vision of a unified Indian subcontinent and the gritty, sometimes grim, realpolitik required to keep it together. Chandragupta eventually stepped down from the throne around 297 BCE, reportedly renouncing the world and becoming a Jain monk. His abdication is a bit of a plot twist. A man who had conquered so much choosing a life of asceticism. It's like Steve Jobs deciding to give up tech to become a hermit. Yet, it's a fitting end for someone whose life was an intricate dance between the worldly and the spiritual. As we leave Chandragupta Maurya behind, let's remember that his story is not just about the rise of a single man, but the birth of a dynasty that would change the course of Indian history. And as we turn the page to his grandson, Ashoka, we'll see how the Mauryan legacy continued to evolve in unexpected and transformative ways. But that's a story for another time. For now, let's toast to Chandragupta, a man who turned chaos into an empire, one strategic move at a time. As we bid adieu to Chandragupta Maurya's saga of empire building, let's not forget that the real test of leadership is often what comes after the triumph. Enter Bindusara, Chandragupta's son and heir, who inherited not just a sprawling empire, but also the delightful task of keeping it glued together. If Chandragupta was the startup genius who built the empire from scratch, Bindusara was the CEO tasked with keeping the company running smoothly and making sure the employees didn't all jump ship for the promise of better silk tunics elsewhere. Bindusara's reign from 297 BCE to 273 BCE was less about the glamorous expansion and more about the nitty-gritty of administration. Imagine taking over a multi-continental corporation where the stakeholders speak a dozen different languages and have their own unique set of cultural quirks. It's like running the world's least cohesive family reunion. Bindusara had to manage territories that stretched from modern-day Afghanistan to Bengal, and let me tell you, that's a lot of ground to cover when you don't have the luxury of Google Maps or even a reliable postal service. First up on Bindusara's to-do list was maintaining the empire's bureaucratic machinery. Chandragupta had already laid the groundwork with a centralized administration, and Bindusara kept it ticking like a finely tuned abacus. The Artha Shastra, still the go-to manual for statecraft, was more than just a dusty tome on a shelf. It was actively employed for everything from espionage to agriculture. Bindusara's administration was divided into departments that would make a modern government proud, or at least envious. There was a ministry for trade, another for public works, and of course, one for the ever-important collection of taxes. You see, running an empire wasn't cheap, and Bindusara had to keep the coffers filled. Taxation was as crucial as ever, and it wasn't just about squeezing the peasants dry. Trade routes were fostered, bringing in wealth and exotic goods from places as far-flung as Greece and China. But let's not pretend it was all spreadsheets and happy merchants. Bindusara had his share of internal strife. The Mauryan Empire was vast and diverse, with regions that had histories longer than a Tolstoy novel. Keeping everyone from revolting required a delicate balance of diplomacy and firm governance. Bindusara was known as Amitraghata, or Slayer of Enemies, a nickname that suggests his approach wasn't all about handing out olive branches. The empire was riddled with local rulers who had to be kept in line, and military force was sometimes the only language they understood. It's worth noting that Bindusara's reign was marked by relatively few major conflicts, suggesting he had a knack for maintaining peace through a combination of strength and savvy negotiation. Economically, Bindusara had to ensure the empire didn't collapse under its own weight. Agriculture was the backbone of the economy, with crops like rice, barley, and wheat providing sustenance and trade goods. The state played a significant role in managing and supporting agriculture, including the construction of irrigation systems that were vital for consistent harvest. This wasn't altruism, it was strategic. A well-fed populace was less likely to revolt and more likely to pay their taxes. Then there were the trade routes, the arteries of the empire's wealth. Bindusara's reign saw an increase in trade with the Hellenistic world, facilitated by the peace treaty with Seleucus I. Goods like textiles, spices, and precious stones flowed out of India, while horses, wine, and other luxury items made their way in. This trade not only filled the treasury, but also brought cultural exchanges that enriched the empire. Imagine the Mauryan court, a bustling hub of ideas and innovations, where Greek philosophers might have rubbed shoulders with Indian scholars, each trying to one-up the other with their respective philosophies. It was a cosmopolitan blend that was as volatile as it was vibrant. However, let's not romanticize Bindusara's reign as a utopia of cultural fusion and economic prosperity. The reality was far more complex and often harsh. The Mauryan legal system was strict, to put it mildly. Punishments could be severe, and justice was sometimes as swift as it was brutal. The empire's stability often rested on a knife's edge, where the threat of rebellion or foreign invasion was a constant spectre. Bindusara had to be ever vigilant, relying heavily on a network of spies to keep him informed about potential threats. It was a world where trust was a rare commodity, and even the most loyal vassal could harbor ambitions of independence. And let's not forget the intriguing yet murky details of Bindusara's personal life, which could fuel an entire season of a historical drama series. His court was reportedly filled with intrigue, with multiple queens and a horde of offspring, each with their own ambitions. Bindusara had 16 sons, the most famous of whom was Ashoka, destined to become one of history's most celebrated rulers. But that's a story for another episode. For now, Bindusara's focus was on making sure his heirs didn't turn the palace into a battleground. Imagine the family dinners, awkward silences, forced smiles, and the occasional dagger hidden under the table. As Bindusara's reign continued, he faced the inevitable challenges of succession. Who would take over this colossal empire? The question was as pressing as it was perilous. The transition of power was a delicate process, one that could make or break the continuity of the empire. Bindusara had to ensure that his successor was not just a figurehead, but a capable leader who could navigate the complexities of ruling an empire that was as diverse as it was expansive. In the end, Bindusara's reign was a testament to the hard work that goes into maintaining an empire. It was less about conquering new lands, and more about holding on to what you have, a task that required as much skill and cunning as any battlefield victory. As we prepare to delve into the reign of Ashoka, remember that the foundation of his legendary rule was laid by his father, Bindusara, who turned the Mauryan Empire from a fledgling dynasty into a stable, enduring power. Now, let's keep that curiosity piqued as we prepare to dive into the transformative reign of Ashoka, a ruler who would redefine what it meant to be an emperor. But that's a tale for another time, so stay tuned as our historical odyssey continues. As we pivot from Bindusara's pragmatic reign to the epic saga of his son Ashoka, buckle up, folks, because things are about to get as intense as a season finale cliffhanger. Enter Ashoka, a ruler whose name would echo through the ages, not just for conquering lands, but for conquering hearts. At least, that's how the story's often told. But hold on to your chariots, because the reality is both more complex and far more intriguing. Now, Ashoka wasn't always the poster child for peace and enlightenment. Before he became the ancient Gandhi, he was more like the ancient Genghis. Let's rewind to around 261 BCE and the infamous Kalinga War, a conflict that's been etched in the annals of history like a particularly bad tattoo. Kalinga, a relatively small yet fiercely independent kingdom on the eastern coast of India, dared to defy the mighty Mauryan Empire. Bad move? Maybe. Courageous? Absolutely. This wasn't just a skirmish over land. It was a battle for autonomy against a backdrop of imperial ambition. The war was a bloody affair, to put it mildly. Contemporary estimates suggest that around 100,000 soldiers and civilians were killed, with another 150,000 deported. That's not just a number, it's a human catastrophe. Picture a scene that would rival any modern-day war zone: chaos, devastation, and loss on a scale that left an indelible mark on Ashoka. It's said that the Dea River ran red with the blood of the fallen. Graphic, right? But here's where the story takes a dramatic twist. Legend has it that the aftermath of the war left Ashoka so shell-shocked that he had a complete change of heart, transforming from a ruthless conqueror into a benevolent ruler who embraced Buddhism and non-violence. It's the kind of narrative that's irresistible, a tale of redemption that's practically begging for its own epic film adaptation. However, let's not get carried away by the Hollywood version. The truth, as always, is more nuanced. Sure, Ashoka did embrace Buddhism and become a champion of peace, but was this purely a spiritual awakening? Or was there more to this transformation than meets the eye? Let's not forget that Ashoka was a savvy ruler, and his policies post-Kalinga weren't just about inner peace. They were also about political strategy. After all, what better way to solidify your rule over a vast, diverse empire than to preach unity and non-violence? By adopting Buddhism, Ashoka wasn't just turning over a new leaf. He was also capitalizing on the growing popularity of this spiritual movement. Buddhism, with its emphasis on compassion and moral conduct, was gaining traction across the subcontinent. Ashoka's conversion and subsequent promotion of Buddhist values helped to unify his empire under a common ideology. It was a masterstroke of statecraft, a way to bind his subjects together with a shared set of beliefs. But let's not paint Ashoka as a mere politician in monk's robes. His embrace of Buddhism seemed genuine, at least in part. He erected stupas, spread Buddhist teachings, and even sent missionaries as far afield as Greece and Sri Lanka. His famous edicts, inscribed on pillars and rocks across the empire, reveal a ruler deeply committed to Dharma, or righteous living. These edicts are like ancient tweets, broadcasting his policies and philosophies far and wide. They cover everything from animal rights — he'd have been a hit with modern-day vegans — to social welfare and religious tolerance. Economically, Ashoka's reign was no less transformative. By fostering trade and building infrastructure, he laid the groundwork for a prosperous and interconnected empire. The famous Grand Trunk Road, which facilitated trade across the northern plains of India, was expanded under his rule. This wasn't just about moving goods, it was about moving ideas, people, and cultures. Ashoka's empire became a melting pot, where diverse traditions and innovations could cross-pollinate like never before. Yet, the myth of the repentant king often overshadows the hard-nosed realities of Ashoka's rule. Even as he promoted peace, he maintained a formidable army and a robust administration. His empire was as much about stability and control as it was about compassion. Ashoka's edicts, for all their moral high ground, were also a tool of governance, ensuring that his subjects adhered to a moral code that kept the empire running smoothly. In the end, Ashoka's legacy is a tapestry woven from both idealism and pragmatism. He left behind an empire that was not only vast, but also sophisticated, a testament to the power of both swords and sermons. It's a legacy that challenges us to look beyond the simplistic narratives of history and appreciate the complex dance between power and principle. As we leave Ashoka contemplating his next move, let's not forget that his story, like all great epics, is far from over. His transformation, both personal and political, set the stage for a golden age of cultural and intellectual flourishing. Yet, it also left his successors with the daunting task of living up to a legacy that was as much myth as it was reality. But that's a story for another time, so keep your curiosity piqued as we continue our journey through the annals of history. The next chapter promises to be just as compelling, filled with intrigue, ambition, and the timeless pursuit of power and wisdom. Ashoka's story, much like a hit TV series, has reached a pivotal moment. The post-Kalinga phase of his reign is where the plot thickens, with Ashoka stepping into a role that would both define him and perplex future historians. Imagine a ruler who, after a brutal war, suddenly embraces Buddhism and non-violence like a rock star, switching from headbanging metal to acoustic folk. That's Ashoka for you, full of surprises and contradictions. Let's dive into the heart of Ashoka's post-Kalinga reign, where the emperor's public relations campaign was nothing short of genius. His edicts, those ancient press releases carved into stone and scattered across the empire, were revolutionary for their time. They weren't just about spreading Buddhist teachings. They were Ashoka's way of broadcasting a new brand of leadership. Think of them as the Mauryan Empire's version of viral tweets, except these messages were etched in rock rather than posted online. Ashoka's edicts covered a range of topics, from moral conduct to social justice, and even animal rights. One of the most striking aspects of these edicts was their accessibility. They were written in local dialects, making them understandable to the average person. No highfalutin Sanskrit here. It's like the difference between a politician's speech that's all jargon and one that actually speaks to the people. Ashoka wanted his message of Dhamma, moral law, to reach every corner of his land, from the bustling cities to the quiet villages. Now, about those edicts. They were more than just moral guidelines. They served as a tool for unifying the diverse cultures within the empire. By promoting a common ethical framework, Ashoka was creating a shared identity that transcended regional differences. His edicts encouraged people to live virtuous lives, respect all religions, and practice nonviolence. Essentially, an early prototype of the modern idea of coexistence. And let's give credit where credit's due. Ashoka was one of the first rulers to officially advocate for religious tolerance, a concept that many leaders today still struggle with. But let's not get too swept up in the idealism without examining the practical genius behind it. Ashoka's promotion of Buddhism and non-violence wasn't just a feel-good campaign. It was a strategic move to maintain control over his vast and culturally diverse empire. By aligning himself with Buddhism, Ashoka tapped into a rapidly growing religious movement that promised social cohesion and allegiance. It was both a genuine spiritual transformation and a shrewd political maneuver. After all, a peaceful population is a compliant one, less likely to revolt when they are busy contemplating the Four Noble Truths. Economically, Ashoka's reign was a high point for the Mauryan Empire. The Grand Trunk Road, a precursor to the superhighways of today, was expanded and improved, facilitating trade across the empire. This road wasn't just a trade route. It was a lifeline that connected the empire's economic hubs, from Taxila in the northwest to Padalipatra in the east. Goods flowed freely, from textiles and spices to precious stones, creating a vibrant economy that bolstered Ashoka's rule. Ashoka's infrastructure projects were the ancient equivalent of a New Deal, putting people to work and stimulating economic growth. Let's address another myth. The notion that Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism meant he dismantled his military. Far from it. The Mauryan army remained a formidable force, ready to defend the empire's borders. Ashoka's embrace of non-violence didn't mean he was naive about the need for defense. It was more about shifting focus from conquest to consolidation. Peace was great for business, after all, and Ashoka understood that stability bred prosperity. The emperor also set about spreading Buddhism beyond the borders of his empire, sending missionaries as far as Southeast Asia and the Mediterranean. This wasn't just about spreading faith. It was a diplomatic mission, a way to create alliances and influence abroad. Ashoka was playing a long game, using soft power to extend his reach. His efforts laid the foundation for Buddhism to become a major world religion, a legacy that endures to this day. Yet, amid all the idealism, Ashoka faced the harsh realities of governance. Maintaining an empire is like juggling flaming torches. One slip, and it's chaos. His administration needed to ensure that the edicts of peace and tolerance didn't breed complacency. Law and order remained paramount, enforced by a network of officials who were the eyes and ears of the emperor. Ashoka's bureaucracy was as vast as it was efficient, ensuring that his policies were implemented across the empire. It was a balancing act of carrot and stick, where moral suasion was backed by the ever-watchful gaze of the state. As Ashoka's reign progressed, the challenge was not just maintaining peace, but keeping the empire's economic and social engines running smoothly. Agriculture remained the backbone of the economy, with state-sponsored irrigation projects ensuring that crops like rice and barley could be grown in abundance. Ashoka's administration also supported trade and crafts, understanding that a thriving economy was crucial to the empire's stability. In the end, Ashoka's legacy is a complex blend of idealism and realpolitik. He was a ruler who genuinely sought to guide his people towards a moral life, yet he remained acutely aware of the practicalities of power. His policies reshaped the Mauryan Empire, creating a model of governance that was both ethical and effective. It's a legacy that invites us to look beyond simplistic labels, appreciating the rich tapestry of motives and outcomes that define historical narratives. So, as we leave Ashoka's transformative reign brimming with both myth and reality, we prepare to step into the next chapter, where the echoes of his rule will reverberate through history, influencing not just his immediate successors, but the world at large. Stay tuned, because the saga of the Mauryan Empire is far from over, and the next episodes promise more intrigue, ambition, and the timeless quest for power and wisdom. And so we find ourselves at the twilight of Ashoka's reign, where the Mauryan Empire stood not just as a formidable political entity, but as a beacon of ethical governance. At least, that's the legend. Yet, history, ever the trickster, has a way of complicating the narrative. As Ashoka's edicts of peace and unity echoed across the land, the very fabric of his empire began to fray at the edges. The decline of the Mauryan Empire is a tale woven from threads of economic strain, administrative overreach, and the ever-daunting challenge of succession. It's a story that unfolds with all the inevitability of a Greek tragedy, set against the backdrop of ancient India. Now, you'd think that an empire as vast as the Mauryan would have figured out a succession plan that didn't resemble musical chairs with daggers. But alas, Ashoka's death in 232 BCE left a power vacuum bigger than the one left by Alexander the Great's departure. Cue the political infighting. Ashoka's successors were a mixed bag, to put it kindly. His immediate successor, Kanala, was sidelined due to blindness, a disqualification that wasn't exactly progressive, but was pretty standard for the time. The throne ultimately went to Dasharatha, Ashoka's grandson, a ruler whose name is remembered with all the enthusiasm of a lukewarm cup of chai. Dasharatha's reign was short and largely ineffective, a footnote sandwiched between the grandeur of Ashoka and the chaos that followed. He ruled for a mere 8 years, and his lack of strong leadership set the stage for further fragmentation. The Mauryan Empire, once a monolithic power, started to splinter like a poorly made clay pot. Regional governors and vassal kings, who'd been biding their time like cats in a fish market, began to assert their independence. The empire that Ashoka had held together with a mix of moral philosophy and military might began to unravel. Let's talk economics because, as any historian worth their salt will tell you, money talks even louder than edicts carved in stone. The Mauryan economy, while robust under Ashoka, began to sag under the weight of its own ambitions. Maintaining an empire spanning 5 million square kilometers is no small feat, and the administrative costs alone were enough to make a treasurer weep. The bureaucratic system that had been Ashoka's pride and joy became a bloated beast, consuming resources at an unsustainable rate. Centralized control started to falter as local officials, sensing the empire's weakening grip, began pocketing more than their fair share of the tax revenue. Moreover, the Mauryan reliance on agriculture as the economic backbone couldn't withstand the pressures of a changing climate and over-farming. Land degradation and declining yields meant less revenue for the state. Add to this the cost of maintaining a standing army, an essential deterrent for both internal and external threats, and you've got an economic cocktail more volatile than a barrel of ancient gunpowder. Externally, the Mauryan Empire faced new threats. The Seleucid Empire, ever the opportunist, watched the Mauryan decline with the keen interest of a hawk eyeing a wounded rabbit. The Indo-Greek kingdoms, formed from the remnants of Alexander's campaigns, began to encroach on the northwestern borders. The empire was like a juicy piece of meat at a lion's banquet, and everyone wanted a bite. Then there were the Sunga and Kanva dynasties, local powers that rose from within the crumbling Mauryan structure. In 185 BCE, the Sunga dynasty, led by Pushyamitra Sunga, a former Mauryan general, staged a coup that toppled the last Mauryan emperor, Brihadratha. And just like that, the once mighty Mauryan Empire was reduced to a collection of regional kingdoms, each vying for dominance like siblings fighting over the last piece of naan. So, what went wrong? The answer is as complex as the empire itself. Ashoka's moral vision, while noble, didn't provide a sustainable model for long-term governance amidst the harsh realities of political power. His successors lacked the charisma and strategic acumen to hold the empire together, and without a strong central authority, the bureaucratic apparatus that had once been a strength became a liability. The empire's economic foundations, undermined by environmental pressures and administrative corruption, couldn't support the weight of its own ambitions. Yet, for all its decline, the Mauryan Empire's legacy is anything but a cautionary tale. Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism and his edicts promoting non-violence and religious tolerance left an indelible mark on the Indian subcontinent and beyond. His efforts to spread Buddhism laid the groundwork for its spread across Asia, influencing countless cultures and societies. The principles of governance and morality that he championed continue to resonate, offering lessons in leadership that transcend time and place. As we close the chapter on the Mauryan Empire, let's reflect on the dual nature of its legacy, an empire that rose to unprecedented heights only to crumble under its own weight. It's a poignant reminder that the dance between idealism and pragmatism, power and principle, is as old as civilization itself. Ashoka's story, with all its grandeur and flaws, invites us to ponder the enduring question of how to wield power wisely in a world that is both ever-changing and timelessly complex. So, as we turn the page, let's remember the Mauryan Empire not just as an ancient superpower, but as a testament to the enduring human quest for unity, justice, and meaning. It's a legacy as intricate as the carvings on Ashoka's pillars, offering both inspiration and caution to those who dare to dream of empires. And with that, dear listeners, we close our epic journey through the Mauryan saga. Until next time, when history beckons us once more to explore its grand tales and hidden truths. Sun Tzu wasn't just a guy with a knack for writing pithy military advice that could double as fortune cookie wisdom. Oh no, he was a man of his time, 5th century BC China, to be exact, an era when battlefield strategy was as essential as a good cup of tea. Let's paint a picture of that world. China was a patchwork quilt of warring states, not exactly the place you'd want to go for a peaceful vacation. There were 7 major states, and they weren't exactly on each other's Christmas card lists. Instead of bickering over who had the best panda reserves, they were more into who could outmaneuver whom on the battlefield. Now, Sun Tzu, or Sun Wu if you're feeling particularly formal, was born in the Kai state around 544 BC. But like any savvy career strategist, he knew the value of relocation. He moved to the state of Wu, which sounds like something out of a martial arts movie, but was very much a real place. It was here that he became a general under King Helu. This wasn't just because he could swing a sword, but because he had a brain finely tuned to the complexities of warfare. His magnum opus, The Art of War, is more than just a dusty old manuscript. It's a 13-chapter blueprint to victory. And while we might think of it as some ancient relic, it was more like the how to win friends and influence people of its time, but with more emphasis on flanking maneuvers and less on networking tips. The book's influence has stretched far and wide. Napoleon had it in his tiny little French hands, and even corporate boardrooms today will toss around Sun Tzu's advice like it's gospel. But let's not get too starry-eyed. The life of a general wasn't all about issuing orders from a plush tent while sipping exquisite teas. No, it was often a grim affair, full of mud, blood, and the kind of decisions that could land you in the history books or an unmarked grave. To top it off, the socio-political landscape was as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. Alliances were as temporary as fair-weather friends, and betrayals were as common as rice in a Chinese meal. The myth of Sun Tzu paints him as a stoic figure who could command armies with a mere wave of his hand, but the reality was far messier. For starters, the troops of that era weren't exactly the well-oiled machines we imagine. They were more like a group of reluctant farmers who'd been handed weapons and told to get on with it. Logistics were a nightmare. Supply chains were rudimentary at best, and feeding an army was less about strategic planning and more about hoping the local area had enough chickens to go around. It's easy to romanticize Sun Tzu as some sort of ancient military savant, but one has to wonder if he was actually a PR genius ahead of his time. After all, the art of war has survived millennia, becoming a cornerstone in both military and business strategy. Sun Tzu had the foresight to condense the chaos of war into neat aphorisms that, conveniently, make for great motivational posters. Was he perhaps crafting his own legend as much as he was crafting his strategies? And let's talk about that famous story where he supposedly demonstrated his prowess by turning the king's concubines into disciplined warriors. The tale goes that after some initial giggles and a couple of executions, the women were marching in perfect order. Whether this story is historical fact or a bit of ancient spin, it's left a lasting impression. It paints Sun Tzu as a man who could impose order on chaos with ruthless efficiency, but also makes you wonder if it was just a clever bit of self-promotion. For Sun Tzu, warfare wasn't just about the biggest army or the sharpest swords. He emphasized espionage, psychological warfare, and the cunning use of misdirection. He knew the real battle was often fought between the ears, not just on the fields. One of his most famous quotes, "All warfare is based on deception," might sound like a line from a Bond villain, but it's a reminder that battles are rarely won by brute force alone. In many ways, Sun Tzu's era was a crucible for cunning minds. The constant state of conflict in China meant that military leaders had to be as shrewd as they were strategic. The political scene was a chessboard where every move could mean the difference between power and oblivion. Sun Tzu managed not only to survive, but to thrive in this environment, his strategies influencing generations long after his time. So was Sun Tzu the ultimate general or the ultimate strategist in self-promotion? Perhaps a little of both. What we do know is that the art of war has endured as a testament to his genius, or at least as a testament to his ability to compile a really compelling set of instructions that still resonate in boardrooms and battlefields alike. As we delve deeper into his strategies, it's worth remembering that while he might have been a master of the battlefield, he was also a master of mastering the narrative, a skill as valuable then as it is now. Sun Tzu's The Art of War isn't just a relic of ancient wisdom. It's a testament to the timelessness of strategy wrapped in a paradoxical package of simplicity and depth. But let's dig into some of those strategies that have been quoted more times than a politician's promises and see how they might fare in today's world of drones and digital warfare. Take the idea of winning without fighting, a hallmark of Sun Tzu's philosophy. It's like the ancient version of winning an argument on Twitter without ever hitting reply. The concept emphasizes psychological warfare, outmaneuvering opponents without spilling a drop of blood. It sounds great in theory, but in practice, it's about as easy as getting a cat to take a bath. Now, Sun Tzu's emphasis on deception might have been groundbreaking back in the days when chariots were the tanks of the battlefield, but it's a strategy that's found a comfortable home in the age of misinformation. Imagine Sun Tzu with access to modern-day cyber warfare. The man would have been a legend in his own Wi-Fi network. His advice to appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend translates perfectly into today's world of strategic hacking and cyber espionage. It's the art of making your opponent dance to your tune without even realizing they're part of the orchestra. Speaking of orchestration, let's not forget his advice on terrain, which seems straightforward until you realize the complexities involved. Sun Tzu waxed poetic about the advantages of higher ground, a concept still relevant in modern warfare where controlling the skies can determine the outcome of a conflict. Back in his day, this was more a matter of finding a nice hill to stand on with your archers. Today, it's about satellites and air superiority, but the principle remains. Control the battlefield's vantage points, and you control the battle. But how does all this stack up against historical accounts of Sun Tzu's supposed military exploits? The truth is, the historical record is about as clear as a mud puddle in a rainstorm. Tales of Sun Tzu leading the state of Wu to victory over Chu sound impressive, but they're about as well documented as your uncle's fishing stories. The Battle of Baju in 506 BC, where Sun Tzu allegedly masterminded a stunning victory, is often cited. Yet, concrete evidence of his direct involvement is as elusive as a yeti in a snowstorm. What we do know is that the state of Wu did indeed give the powerful state of Chu a significant walloping, thanks to cunning tactics that would make any strategist proud. Whether Sun Tzu was at the helm or just a particularly good cheerleader, though, remains a topic of scholarly debate. Now, let's spin the globe back to the economics of ancient warfare. The Warring States period was an era where military expenditure could make or break a state faster than you can say, budget deficit. Maintaining a standing army wasn't just a matter of handing out swords and hoping for the best. It was a logistical nightmare that involved feeding, equipping, and maintaining soldiers who were basically full-time employees, minus the dental benefits. The cost of outfitting an army was staggering. A single suit of armor could cost as much as an average family's annual income. In today's terms, imagine trying to equip a modern military force while also balancing the national budget, and you'll get the idea. And then there's the matter of logistics. Sun Tzu loved to talk about the importance of supply lines, and for good reason. An army marches on its stomach, after all, and a well-fed soldier is a happy soldier, or at least a less mutinous one. Back in Sun Tzu's day, ensuring the troops were well-fed meant either raiding local farms or having a supply line that extended back to the home front, which was easier said than done when your truck was a cart pulled by an overworked mule. Fast forward to today, and armies still grapple with the complexities of logistics, albeit with a few more high-tech gadgets in their toolkit. So, while Sun Tzu's strategies have stood the test of time, they're not without their limits. The romantic notion of the all-seeing, all-knowing general is as much a product of myth as it is of reality. In truth, Sun Tzu's greatest legacy might just be his ability to distill the chaos of war into a set of principles that, while ancient, still resonate. His teachings offer a reminder that the art of war isn't just about battles fought on the ground, but also about the battles fought in the mind. Winning, in the end, isn't just about who has the most swords, but who has the sharpest strategy. And that, dear friends, is a lesson as relevant today as it was 500 years ago. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the intricate dance of strategy, economics, and myth that surrounds Sun Tzu and his enduring legacy. But as we dig deeper into the enigma of Sun Tzu, we hit a wall that historians know all too well, the blurry line between fact and folklore. Was Sun Tzu even a real guy, or just an ancient Chinese version of Batman, a symbol of strategic genius crafted to inspire legions of military minds? The historical record on Sun Tzu is a patchwork quilt with more holes than an old pair of socks. We have the art of war, sure, but the man who supposedly penned it, well, that's where things get murky. Start with his supposed birth year, around 544 BC. That date is as solid as quicksand. We don't have a birth certificate, not even a clay tablet with his baby footprint. Then there's the whole bit about him serving King Helu of Wu. The timeline gets fuzzy here, too. Some scholars suggest Sun Tzu might have been more of a brand than a person, a collective name for a bunch of strategists who contributed to the text over time. It's like if Shakespeare were actually a group of playwrights working under one name to avoid Elizabethan tax laws. The story of Sun Tzu is bolstered by the kind of myth-making that makes for great campfire tales but lousy history exams. Take that famous episode with the king's concubines. It's the stuff of legend, yes, but also the stuff of skepticism. Did Sun Tzu really turn a gaggle of giggling women into a crack military squad just to prove a point? Or is it more likely a story designed to amplify his mystique, like the strategic equivalent of an urban legend? Despite the shifty sands of his biography, Sun Tzu's influence is as real as it gets. His teachings have been adapted, misappropriated, and downright twisted in contexts he could never have imagined. Let's take a stroll through how the art of war has been interpreted from Wall Street to the World Cup. In the corporate jungle, Sun Tzu's strategies are quoted more than an overly enthusiastic CEO in a board meeting. Executives love to toss around phrases like "know your enemy" when they're really just talking about market competition. It turns out that the art of war is the perfect accessory for anyone looking to spice up a PowerPoint presentation with a dash of ancient wisdom. Sports teams have also jumped on the Sun Tzu bandwagon. Coaches love to draw parallels between the battlefield and the playing field, as if winning a football game is akin to conquering an empire. The idea of winning without fighting translates into strategies like outsmarting the opposing team with clever plays rather than brute force. Of course, telling an athlete to let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night might just result in a confused look and a request for a simpler playbook. But let's not kid ourselves. Sun Tzu's ideas have been misused more times than a celebrity's face on a meme. In some circles, his teachings have been cherry-picked to justify all sorts of questionable tactics. When a business leader uses the art of war to rationalize cutthroat practices, it's like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The nuance of Sun Tzu's strategies often gets lost in translation. reduced to buzzwords that sound impressive but lack depth. And what about the economic impact of his teachings? The Warring States period wasn't just a time of conflict. It was an economic puzzle as complex as assembling IKEA furniture without an instruction manual. States poured resources into their armies like there was no tomorrow, and for many, there wasn't. This was an era where the cost of war could bankrupt a state faster than you can say fiscal responsibility. Sun Tzu's strategies emphasized efficiency, a concept as vital then as it is now. Wasting resources on a protracted battle was a no-go, just as wasting resources on a failed product launch today can sink a company. The romantic allure of Sun Tzu is undeniable, but it's essential to remember that his strategies were born out of necessity, not luxury. They were forged in the fires of a brutal era where survival depended on outsmarting rather than outspending the competition. The genius of the art of war lies in its ability to distill chaos into clarity, offering insights that transcend time and technology. So, was Sun Tzu a real figure or an ancient construct? The jury's still out, but one thing is certain. His legacy has grown legs and sprinted through the centuries, influencing everything from military tactics to modern-day management seminars. It's a testament to the power of ideas and the human penchant for turning myth into a guiding star. As we continue our journey into the realm of strategy and legend, let's keep our eyes peeled for more insights and surprises. Sun Tzu may be a shadowy figure, but his influence casts a long shadow indeed. With each passing century, his teachings have been reimagined, reshaped, and revitalized, proving that while the man might be a mystery, the message remains as clear as ever. The art of war is also the art of thinking. So stay tuned as we unravel more threads of history, myth, and the timeless dance of strategy. And speaking of thinking, let's think about how Sun Tzu's little book of wisdom has wormed its way into the minds of some of history's most ambitious figures. Take Napoleon Bonaparte, for instance, the Frenchman who made being short and power-hungry look like a legitimate career path. Napoleon wasn't just playing Risk with real armies. He was a voracious consumer of military strategy, and yes, the art of war was on his reading list. He once said, "The battlefield is a scene of constant chaos. The winner will be the one who controls that chaos, both his own and the enemy's." Sound familiar? It's like he had a heartline to Sun Tzu himself. Napoleon wasn't the only one flipping through the art of war like it was the latest thriller. Fast forward to the 20th century, and you'll find Mao Zedong, who wasn't exactly sending out friend requests to the West, treating Sun Tzu's advice like a personal playbook. Mao's guerrilla tactics during the Chinese Civil War were steeped in Sun Tzu's principles. He famously said, "The enemy advances, we retreat. The enemy camps, we harass. The enemy tires, we attack. The enemy retreats, we pursue." It's practically Sun Tzu in modern Mandarin. You can almost imagine Sun Tzu nodding along approvingly wherever he was. But the influence of the art of war isn't just about generals and emperors. Oh no, its reach extends into boardrooms and business schools, where Sun Tzu is quoted almost as often as Synergy and Think Outside the Box. Modern CEOs have adopted his strategies to navigate the cutthroat world of corporate competition, where hostile takeovers are the Newcastle sieges. Sun Tzu's advice to know your enemy has been rebranded as market research, and winning without fighting has become the art of the negotiation table. It's the kind of repurposing that would make a recycling center proud. And speaking of creative interpretations, let's not forget the sometimes laughable attempts to use Sun Tzu's wisdom in arenas he never imagined. For instance, there was that time when a small tech startup in Silicon Valley decided to use the art of war as a manual for developing their app. Their battle plan: outthink the competition without any actual product to back it up. Spoiler alert, they didn't win without fighting, they just didn't win at all. Turns out, Sun Tzu's strategies work best with a solid foundation, whether on the battlefield or in business. Then there are the sports teams that treat Sun Tzu's advice like a secret playbook. Coaches love to use his strategies for inspiring locker room speeches, equating a football match to a life-or-death struggle, which, let's be honest, might be a bit of an overreach. The idea of letting your plans be dark and impenetrable as night sounds great, until you realize you still need to explain it to your quarterback, who's just trying to figure out how to avoid a sack. But perhaps some of the most poignant, if not peculiar, applications of the art of war come from the world of self-help. Yes, Sun Tzu has been co-opted into the realm of personal development, where his teachings are transformed into mantras for everyday life. Want to win at life? Just follow Sun Tzu's advice. It's like a life coach with a 500-year track record. Of course, using military strategy to navigate a tricky conversation at the family dinner table might be a bit overkill, but who's counting? Still, the enduring appeal of the art of war can't be denied. Its principles have been stretched, skewed, and sometimes downright butchered to fit modern contexts. And yet, the core of Sun Tzu's teachings, a focus on strategy, efficiency, and understanding one's environment, continues to resonate. It's a testament to the timelessness of his insights, even if they occasionally end up being used as overblown motivational quotes in PowerPoint presentations. Now, let's not forget the economic backdrop against which Sun Tzu's strategies played out. The Warring States period wasn't just a time of epic battles and strategic maneuvers. It was an economic pressure cooker. States spent lavishly on their armies, with war chests that could make or break a kingdom. Maintaining a fighting force wasn't as simple as handing out swords and hoping for the best. It involved a complex network of logistics, supply lines, and a whole lot of silver coins. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of funding a modern military-industrial complex, and you've got the right idea. Feeding an army wasn't just a matter of finding the nearest chicken coop. It required a steady flow of resources that could stretch for miles. Sun Tzu knew the importance of keeping the supply lines open and the troops well fed. After all, a hungry soldier is about as useful in battle as a cat at a dog show. His emphasis on efficiency and economy in warfare wasn't just smart, it was essential to survival. In today's terms, it's like balancing the federal budget while simultaneously funding a nationwide infrastructure project. And speaking of logistics, let's talk about the role of intelligence in Sun Tzu's strategies. In an era long before satellites and spy planes, gathering information about the enemy was a crucial task. Sun Tzu's emphasis on espionage and deception was a game changer. His advice to appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak, was a masterclass in psychological warfare. In today's world, that might equate to hacking your competitors' emails or launching a misinformation campaign, but the core idea remains the same. Knowledge is power, and the best battles are won before they're even fought. But let's bring it back to the man himself, or the legend, depending on which side of the historical debate you're on. Sun Tzu's legacy is a curious mix of fact and folklore, strategy and storytelling. Whether he was a single genius or a collective of clever minds, his teachings have shaped the way we think about conflict and competition. His ability to distill chaos into clarity is as valuable today as it was in ancient China. It's a reminder that while the tools of war may have changed, the art of thinking strategically is timeless. So, as we continue to unravel the tangled web of history, let's keep our eyes peeled for more surprises. Sun Tzu may be a shadowy figure, but his influence is as real as the battles he sought to win. Whether on the battlefield, in the boardroom, or on the playing field, the art of war remains a testament to the power of strategic thinking and the enduring appeal of a good old-fashioned underdog story. Stay tuned for the next chapter in our journey through the annals of history, where myth meets reality and strategy reigns supreme. So here we are, at the tail end of our journey through the strategic realms of Sun Tzu and his elusive magnum opus, the art of war. We've danced around the battlefield, navigated the murky waters of historical fact and fiction, and peeked into the minds of military leaders and CEOs alike. But now, let's tie it all together and reflect on why, after 500 years, Sun Tzu's teachings still pack a punch sharper than a samurai sword. First, let's tackle the elephant in the room, Sun Tzu's biography, or lack thereof. It's like trying to assemble a puzzle with half the pieces missing and the rest potentially from another box. Yet, despite the gaps, Sun Tzu has become a towering figure in strategic thought. His mystique is partly why his teachings endure. It's the classic allure of the enigmatic genius. We humans do love a good mystery, don't we? It's like the allure of the Mona Lisa's smile. What we don't know is what keeps us coming back for another look. Let's face it, the ambiguity surrounding Sun Tzu's life and times adds a certain sheen to his legacy. If he were just another well-documented general with a mundane list of battles won and lost, Will we still be quoting him at corporate retreats and in lacquer rooms? Probably not. The lack of concrete details leaves room for imagination, for myth-making. It's the blank canvas on which countless strategists have painted their own interpretations, each claiming a piece of his wisdom for their own. It's a little like the Wild West of intellectual property. Everyone's got a stake, and nobody's got a deed. Now, why does the art of war remain as relevant as a smartphone in the digital age? For starters, it's a masterclass in adaptability. Sun Tzu didn't just dish out one-size-fits-all solutions. He offered a framework for thinking strategically, a mindset that transcends the specifics of any given era. His teachings are like a Swiss Army knife of strategy, handy in almost any situation. The advice to know yourself and your enemy isn't just for generals. It's for anyone navigating the treacherous waters of human interaction. Whether you're leading an army or just trying to get through a family dinner, it helps to know who you're dealing with. Economically speaking, Sun Tzu's strategies were born in a time when resources were as scarce as a hen's teeth. The Warring States period was a financial quagmire, where military expenditures could drain a state's coffers faster than a warlord could say, "Conquest." In such a climate, efficiency wasn't just preferred, it was mandatory. Sun Tzu's emphasis on winning without fighting was essentially about getting the biggest bang for your buck, a lesson as applicable in today's budget meetings as it was in ancient China's war councils. But let's not sugarcoat things. Sun Tzu's world was brutal. The romanticized notion of the noble warrior belies a harsh reality where battles were bloody affairs, and survival often depended on cunning as much as courage. His teachings reflect this gritty reality, offering lessons not just in warfare, but in the human condition itself. The idea that all warfare is based on deception isn't just about military cunning. It's an observation about the complexities of human nature. After all, who hasn't put on a brave face to hide uncertainty or feigned confidence to win over a skeptical audience? And let's not forget the myth-busting aspect of Sun Tzu's legacy. The stories of him turning concubines into soldiers or engineering miraculous victories are as much about his skill in crafting his own legend as they are about military prowess. Whether he was a real person or a composite of several strategists, the tales surrounding him have taken on a life of their own, becoming part of the cultural lexicon. They remind us that history is as much about the stories we tell as it is about the events that happened. So, as we wrap up this exploration of Sun Tzu's enduring influence, let's take a moment to appreciate the interplay between myth and reality. His legacy isn't just about the words he wrote, or didn't write, but about the way those words have been interpreted, adapted, and sometimes twisted to fit the needs of each new generation. Sun Tzu's The Art of War endures because it's not just a book about ancient battles. It's a guide to navigating the battlefield of life, where the stakes are high and the rules are constantly changing. In the end, Sun Tzu's greatest victory may not have been on any battlefield, but in the realm of ideas. His teachings have transcended the limits of time and culture, proving that while the tools of war may change, the art of strategic thinking is timeless. So whether you're plotting a corporate takeover, coaching a soccer team, or just trying to outsmart your cat, remember that the wisdom of Sun Tzu is only as useful as the mind that wields it. And that, dear friends, is the true art of war.